He snapped my arm like it was nothing, like I was nothing, and he smiled the whole way to the hospital, smiled at the nurses, smiled at the doctor, and I just stood there thinking if I scream right now, no one in this room is going to believe me over him. She didn't scream. She borrowed a stranger's phone. She whispered 5 words, and 300 miles away, a man who hadn't heard those words in 15 years dropped everything and started the engine. If this is your first time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and follow this story all the way to the end, because what happens next is going to stay with you. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The emergency room at Pine Ridge General was never loud on Friday nights. That was the thing about small Montana towns. People either handled their problems quietly or they didn't handle them at all. The staff on the night shift had learned not to ask too many questions about the how and the why of things. They patched people up. They filled out the forms. They moved on to the next bed. So when Jason Mercer walked through those automatic doors at 9:47 in the evening, with his arm around Emily Carter, the duty nurse at the front desk smiled without thinking about it. He was that kind of man. The kind who made people smile reflexively, like a social reflex, before their brain had time to catch up with their instincts. She slipped on the ice, Jason said pleasantly, his hand resting on Emily's shoulder in a way that looked caring from a distance. I told her to let me salt the driveway, but she wanted to do it herself. You know how she is. The nurse didn't know how she was. She had never met Emily Carter before that night, but she nodded anyway because Jason's voice carried the easy confidence of a man who had never once in his life been doubted, and that kind of confidence has a gravity to it that most people don't even notice they're being pulled into. Emily said nothing. She was holding her left arm against her chest at an angle that wasn't natural, and her face had gone the particular color of old chalk. Not pale from cold, pale from pain that had been going on long enough to settle into the body's architecture. The nurse glanced at the arm. She reached for a clipboard. "And your name?" "Emily Carter," Emily said. Her voice was completely flat, not traumatized flat, controlled flat. The voice of someone who had spent a great deal of time learning how to sound like nothing was wrong. Date of birth, March 14th, 1998. Jason answered a question about insurance before the nurse even asked it, pulling out a card from his wallet with practiced ease and sliding it across the desk with 2 fingers like a man accustomed to smoothing things over with paperwork. He kept his hand on Emily's shoulder the whole time, kept his eyes moving between the nurse and Emily in a way that looked attentive and loving and was neither of those things. They were brought to a curtained bay in the middle of the department. A young resident came in within 10 minutes, introduced himself as Dr. Avery, and began a careful examination of Emily's arm with his fingers while Jason stood 2 feet away and explained again about the ice in the driveway and how Emily really should have let him do it. Dr. Avery listened to Jason. He also watched Emily. She was not looking at Jason. She was not looking at the doctor. She was staring at a fixed point on the curtain, 3 inches above the IV card, and she was breathing with a deliberateness that he recognized from his trauma rotation, that very specific technique of breathing that people develop when they're managing something that would otherwise unmake them. "Emily Tolle," Dr. Avery said quietly, "I'm going to need to send you for imaging. Is there anything you'd like to tell me before we do that?" Jason started to speak. The doctor held up one hand without looking at him and, "I was asking Emily." A silence stretched out. Emily's eyes moved from the curtain to the doctor's face for a fraction of a second. Something passed through her expression, something quick and complicated, and then gone like a fish turning beneath the surface of dark water. "I slipped on the ice," she said. Dr. Avery nodded once. He wrote something on his pad. An orderly arrived to take Emily for the x-ray. Jason moved to follow. The doctor stepped into his path with the particular unhurried firmness of a man who had made this move before. "Hospital policy," Dr. Avery said pleasantly. "Only patients in the imaging suite." Jason's smile stayed exactly where it was. Of course, I'll be right here." He sat down in the chair beside the empty bed and pulled out his phone. The x-ray confirmed what Dr. Avery's hands had already told him. The radius was fractured at the distal end, a clean snap, not the jagged break that usually came from a fall. The kind of break that came from torque, from something being twisted in a direction a joint was not designed to go. He had seen this particular injury before. He stood in the imaging corridor for a moment looking at the scan, and then he walked back toward the bay with a decision already forming. Hospital protocol on suspected abuse was clear. His obligation was clear. He would speak to the social worker. He would document. He would give Emily every resource available to her. What he could not do was make her say the words she wasn't ready to say. He had learned that the hard way in his second year of residency when he'd pushed too hard, and the woman he was trying to help had walked out of the hospital and back into the situation he was trying to extract her from. He'd thought about her for years afterward. He went back to the bay. Jason was still on his phone, thumb moving across the screen in unhurried scrolls. "Good news," Dr. Avery said, "is that it's a clean fracture. We can cast it tonight. Emily, we're going to get you more comfortable while we set it up. Is there anything you need right now?" "Water," Emily said. "Absolutely." He turned to a passing nurse. "Can we get water for the patient in Bay 6? The nurse went, Psh. Dr. Avery looked at Jason. "Sir, there are vending machines down the hall if you'd like something while you wait. This is going to take a little time." Jason assessed him for a moment. Then he smiled and stood. "Sure, you want anything, Em?" "I'm fine," she said. He disappeared around the curtain. Emily watched the gap in the curtain for 5 full seconds after he was gone. Then she turned to the doctor with eyes that were completely different from the eyes she'd been wearing since she walked through the front doors, sharper, urgent, and very, very afraid. "How long do I have?" she whispered. Dr. Avery understood immediately. "The vending machines are about 90 seconds away. If he hurries, maybe 2 minutes. If he doesn't, I need a phone." He pulled his personal cell from his coat pocket without hesitation and handed it to her. Emily's hands were shaking. Her left arm was useless. She used her right hand to dial a number that she had not dialed in over a year, that she had never stored in any phone Jason could access, that she had memorized when she was 9 years old, and kept locked in the back of her mind like a fire exit she hoped she would never need. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, a voice answered that was so familiar it nearly broke her open, a voice she associated with being 7 years old and scraped knees, and someone who never once let her fall without catching her. "Yeah, Ryan." Her voice cracked on the single syllable. She pulled it back together by sheer force of will. "Ryan, listen to me." A pause. She could hear the background noise shift on his end, conversations becoming quieter, the particular silence of a room paying attention. What's wrong?" Not a question. He already knew. 15 years of not hearing from her in this particular register of voice, and he already knew. She looked at the gap in the curtain. "The black wolves are limping again," she whispered. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds. "I'm coming," Ryan Carter said. She handed the phone back to Dr. Avery. She turned her face back to the fixed point on the curtain. Her breathing returned to its controlled, deliberate rhythm. When Jason came back 40 seconds later with a Snickers bar and a can of Sprite, Emily was sitting exactly where he'd left her, looking exactly the way she'd looked when he'd left her. He sat down. He offered her the Sprite. She shook her head. He smiled and opened it for himself. 300 miles southwest in the gravel parking lot of a converted warehouse outside Billings that served as the central chapter house of the HELLS Angels Montana chapter, Ryan Carter was already on his feet before the call ended. He was 41 years old. He stood 6'2" and weighed 215 and had a gray beard he'd been growing since he was 28. He'd been president of this chapter for 9 years, which in the world of motorcycle clubs was a tenure that required either extraordinary diplomacy or extraordinary toughness, or more accurately both, simultaneously, and in measures that changed depending on the hour of the day. He was not a man who scared easily. He was scared right now. He walked back into the main room of the chapter house. There were 11 men in there, some at the bar, some at the poker table in the corner, 2 watching a game on the television bolted above the pool table. They all read the change in his expression before he opened his mouth, because that was the thing about men who had ridden together for years. They learned each other's weather patterns the way farmers learn the sky. The room went quiet. "My sister just used the code," Ryan said. No one asked what the code was. No one asked what it meant. They didn't need to. Danny Falk, who was 53 and had been riding with Ryan longer than any other man in the room, set down his beer and said, "Where a Pine Ridge General? She's in the ER." "She hurt?" "Yeah." Danny said, "How many of us are you taking?" "None," Ryan said. That surprised them. He could see it move through the room, a small wave of collective reaction that the men suppressed because they'd learned not to push back on Ryan Carter without a reason. Ryan, Danny started. I said none. Ryan was already moving toward the back hallway where the offices were. This isn't a raid. This isn't a show of force. I don't know what happened yet, and I'm not going in loud until I do. I'm going alone. You don't go alone, Danny said. That's been the rule for 6 years, and you're the one who made it. Ryan stopped walking. He turned around. Then you ride behind me, and you stay outside whatever building I go into, and you don't move unless I call you. That's what you do. Danny looked at him for 3 seconds. All right, all right. Ryan was already at the door to his office. Gear up. We leave in 20 minutes. Shame. Inside his office, the door closed. Ryan Carter sat down at his desk for exactly 45 seconds. He allowed himself 45 seconds of feeling it, the ice water in his chest, the way his hands were doing, something they almost never did. The memory that came back like a physical force, Emily at 9 years old, sitting across from him in their grandfather's kitchen in the house outside Billings, their grandfather's voice low and serious while he explained the code to both of them. If something is wrong, their grandfather had said, and you can't say it out loud because the wrong person is listening, you tell me the black wolves are limping. You tell your brother, whoever can help. You tell them exactly those words and nothing else because those words can't be misunderstood. Why wolves, Emily had asked. Because wolves don't limp unless something's very wrong, their grandfather said. And when they're limping, the whole pack needs to know. Ryan had been 25 when their grandfather died. Emily had been 20. At the funeral, she had gripped his hand and said, I'm never going to need the code. You know that, right? He had not said what he was thinking, which was that he hoped she was right. He sat at his desk for 45 seconds. Then he stood up, pulled on his cut, and started making calls. The first call was to a man named Gerald Hobbs, who was 67 years old and had been the sheriff of Cascade County for 22 years before retiring to a small house outside of Great Falls. Gerald had done Ryan a significant professional favor 3 years earlier, had been honest with him about the boundaries of the law in a situation where many men in his position would have taken the easy road, and Ryan had remembered it. Gerald picked up on the second ring. It's Carter. I know. What do you need? I need to know what I can do legally and what I can't if I suspect a woman in Pine Ridge has been abused by someone with money and connections. A pause. Gerald's voice shifted into what Ryan thought of as his working register, slower, more precise, stripped of warmth. Is this active? She's in the ER right now. She reported. No. She going to? I don't know yet. Gerald was quiet for a moment. The hospital is required by Montana law to document suspected abuse injuries. If the treating physician suspects domestic violence, they're obligated to note it in the record regardless of whether the patient discloses. That documentation doesn't go away, Ryan. It exists. If she ever decides to use it, it's there. What about the man? Without her cooperation, you can't force a criminal charge. But a criminal charge isn't the only option available. Depending on what you find, you could have a civil case. You could have professional licensing issues if he holds any kind of regulated certification. Financial misconduct if there's any overlap there. She doesn't have to testify in every forum. He's a financial advisor. Gerald made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Well, licensed professionals have licensing boards. Licensing boards don't require the same standard of proof as criminal courts, and they're considerably less fond of scandal. Good, Ryan said. I'll be in touch. He hung up and dialed the second number. The second call was to a woman named Patricia Osei, who was 48 years old and had built one of the most respected plaintiffs' practices in western Montana out of what she privately described as pure stubbornness and the deeply held conviction that rich men were not in fact the same as right men. She and Ryan had crossed paths twice, once in opposition, once in alliance, and had arrived at a mutual respect that was occasionally almost warm. Ryan Carter, she said when she answered, it's 11 o'clock at night. I know, I wouldn't call if it wasn't serious. It never is with you. What happened? He told her the outline, his sister, the ER, the boyfriend, the arm. He didn't use names yet. He used terms financial advisor, small town, documented injury, 10 months. Patricia was quiet through all of it. When he finished, she said, does she want help? She used the code, Ryan said. She used a code she hasn't used since she was a kid to tell me she was in danger. Yeah, she wants help. Does she understand what help looks like? Does she understand what she's going to have to do to make it stick? Not yet, I'm going to her now. All right, tell her to document everything before she says a word to him again. Texts, emails, financial records, bank statements if he's had access to her accounts, medical records from tonight which the hospital will have, any photographs, any witnesses who've seen anything at all. Patricia paused. And Ryan, tell her to be careful about what she says to him before this is in place. If he's smart, and you're telling me he's convincing, so let's assume he's smart, he's going to try to get ahead of this. He's going to try to control the narrative before she can. I know the type. I know you do. Call me when you get there. She paused again. Is she all right? Ryan looked at the wall of his office for a moment. She will be he said, Juan. The third call was to a man named Marcus Webb, who was 44 and ran a private investigation firm out of Missoula that specialized in what Marcus described with a deliberate vagueness as gathering information that people would prefer remained ungathered. Marcus had worked with abuse survivors before, had in fact done 3 cases for Patricia Osei in the past 2 years, and he knew how to be thorough without being loud. Ryan gave him a name, Jason Mercer, Pine Ridge, Montana, financial advisor. How quickly do you need it? Marcus asked. I need everything you can find by Monday morning. That's 48 hours. Yes. It'll cost you. I'm aware. Marcus said, I'll start tonight. Ryan hung up. He sat still for exactly 10 seconds. Then he stood up, walked out of his office through the chapter house and out to the parking lot where Danny Falk and 6 other men were already beside their bikes in riding gear waiting. Ryan looked at them. We ride quiet, he said. No displays, no threats, no anything until I know what we're dealing with. Anybody who can't commit to that stays here. Nobody stayed. The roads of Montana in January at midnight are not kind to anyone. The temperature had dropped to 11 degrees Fahrenheit by the time they cleared the city lights and hit the open highway, and the wind coming off the eastern face of the mountains hit sideways and brutal. The kind of cold that didn't just chill, but interrogated, got into the gaps in your gear, found the places where the fabric didn't meet the zipper, made every exposed inch of skin feel like a conversation you didn't want to be having. Ryan wrote at the front of the column, and he didn't feel any of it. He was running memory. He was running all the things he hadn't done, all the calls he hadn't made all the times over the past 2 years when he'd heard something careful and managed in Emily's voice and had told himself she was an adult and she had the right to live her own life. She did have that right. He hadn't been wrong about that. But there was a difference between respecting someone's right to make their own choices and using that respect as a reason not to pay attention. He had been inattentive. He knew it now with a clarity that felt physical, like a stone sitting in the middle of his chest, and he didn't push it away because he'd learned a long time ago that the feelings you push away have a tendency to resurface at the worst possible moments with considerably more force. He let himself feel it. He had not paid enough attention. That was the truth, and he held it for the next 300 miles. It was 9 minutes past 2 in the morning when Ryan Carter walked through the doors of Pine Ridge General Hospital. The night had settled into the particular quiet of small hospitals after midnight, the overhead fluorescents doing their indifferent work above empty chairs, a single nurse at the station moving papers with the deliberate economy of someone rationing energy until their shift ended, the occasional beep of something medical happening somewhere behind closed doors. He went to the desk. The nurse looked up. She registered him the cut the size of him, the controlled focus in his face, and he watched her decide something. I'm looking for Emily Carter, he said. I'm her brother. And your name? Ryan Carter. She looked at her screen. Then she looked at him again, and this time there was something different in her expression, something that might have been recognition or might have been relief. She asked if anyone had called for her, the nurse said carefully. About an hour ago. She asked specifically. She asked if anyone had called, and then she asked if there was a way to know if anyone was coming. Ryan held that for a moment. She's in Bay 6, the nurse said. The man who came in with her is in the waiting area down the hall. Ryan understood the pause before the man. Thank you, he said. He walked to Bay 6. He pushed the curtain aside. Emily was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed in a fresh hospital gown, her left arm already in a temporary splint, her right hand folded in her lap. She looked up when the curtain moved. She looked at him. Her face did something complicated and brief, and then she held it together. He could see her, hold it together, could see the specific internal mechanism of her composure being engaged, and it broke something in him a little that she had learned to do that so thoroughly. "You came," she said. "I told you I was coming." He came to the bed and sat in the chair beside it. He looked at her arm. He looked at her face, the set of her jaw, the careful steadiness of her eyes. He looked at all of it, and he said nothing for a moment because there was too much and none of it was the right thing to lead with. "I'm sorry," Emily said. "You don't apologize to me," Ryan said. "Not for this, not ever for this." "I should have—" "Emily, stop." His voice was quiet, not harsh, just solid the way a wall is solid, something to lean against. "You don't explain it to me, and you don't apologize for it. What you do is tell me what you need." She looked at him. Something in her eyes shifted, not breaking but shifting, like a tide changing direction. "I need him to never be able to do this to anyone else," she said. Ryan nodded. "All right. I don't want—" She stopped. She looked at her hands. "I know you, Ryan. I know what you want to do, and I'm asking you not to. I'm not here to do anything to him. I'm asking you to promise me." He looked at her for a long moment. His jaw was tight. His hands were still. "Promise me," she said again, quieter this time, knowing what it cost him. "I promise you," Ryan said. "He's yours. What happens to him is yours. I'm just here to make sure you can do what you need to do without being afraid." Emily exhaled. It was a long, slow exhalation, and it seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her lungs. "Okay," she said. "Okay, then here's what I need." And she told him. Jason Mercer had been sitting in the waiting room for 2 hours and 40 minutes when Ryan Carter walked out of the ER corridor and past the waiting room entrance. Ryan didn't look at him. He kept walking. But he had timed his route specifically to take him past that entrance because he needed to see the man. He needed to put a face on it. Jason Mercer was 38 years old, and he looked exactly the way Ryan had imagined, put together even at this hour, good watch, expensive casual clothes, hair that still looked intentional. He was staring at his phone when Ryan passed. He had the face of a man who was mildly inconvenienced, not distressed. The face of a man running calculations. Ryan kept walking. He went outside to the parking lot where Danny and the others were waiting. The cold hit him immediately. He stood in it without registering it. "Well," Danny said, "she's okay. She's going to be okay." He paused. "Her arm is broken." Danny's jaw tightened. "We're not going near him," Ryan said before Danny could speak. "That's Emily's decision, and I gave her my word. What we are going to do is make sure that whatever she needs to do, she can do it safely, without interference, without fear." "So what do we do right now?" Ryan thought about it. "Right now," he said, "you go home. I'm staying here tonight. I'll call you when I know what the next move is." Danny looked at him. "Go home," Ryan said. "Get some sleep. There's work coming, and I'm going to need all of you with clear heads when it starts." Danny looked at the hospital entrance for a moment. Then he looked at Ryan. "You call me. Come, he said. The second you need anything. You'll be first." Danny nodded. He turned to the others. A few words quiet. Engines starting one at a time, unhurried. They pulled out of the lot and onto the dark road, and in 60 seconds, Ryan was alone in the parking lot with the cold and the distant light of the ER entrance and the sound of his own breathing. He went back inside. He found a chair in the corridor outside Base 6, and he sat down in it. He was still there at sunrise. Emily slept for 3 hours, which was 3 more than she'd expected to get. When she woke, the light was different, the thin, gray-white of a Montana January morning coming through the narrow window above the bed, and for a moment in the displaced way of waking in an unfamiliar place, she didn't know where she was. Then her arm told her. The arm remembered even through the painkillers, and the memory came back in its complete and unvarnished form. She lay still for a moment and took inventory. Her arm was broken. She was in Pine Ridge General Hospital. Jason was somewhere in this building. Her brother was somewhere in this building. She had made a phone call last night that she could not unmake, and she didn't want to unmake it, and that fact that she didn't regret it was itself a revelation. For the past 10 months, she had been regulating herself against the possibility of Ryan. She had been managing in the back of every decision the question of what Ryan would do if he knew managing it by keeping him from knowing. Because Ryan's way of dealing with men like Jason was immediate and visceral and would have felt in the moment like the most satisfying possible response. And she knew she had always known that it would have destroyed her case and given Jason exactly the narrative he needed. Volatile sister, violent brother, domestic drama. She had known somewhere deep and practical beneath all the fear that the only way to really end this was to end it correctly. She just hadn't known if she was strong enough to do it correctly. She pushed herself upright with her right arm. The movement sent a pulse of pain through her left side that she breathed through carefully. She looked at the curtain. "Ryan," she said. A beat of silence. Then the curtain moved, and he was there, and he looked like he'd slept in a chair, which he had, and his face was exactly the face she remembered from every hard moment of their childhood. The specific expression of Ryan Carter when he had made a decision and was at peace with it, which was not a soft expression, but was one of the most reliable things she had ever known. "Morning," he said. "You stayed all night." "Of course I stayed all night." She looked at him. "Where is he?" "I don't know. The waiting room when I last walked by about an hour ago. He might have left. I didn't check again." "He'll come in here soon," she said. "He'll come in here and he'll be worried and apologetic, and he'll have a version of last night that's already been cleaned up and organized, and he'll want me to agree to it." "And what are you going to do?" Emily looked at her splinted arm. "I'm going to listen," she said, "and I'm going to let him think that I'm still the same person I was yesterday. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to spend the next few days doing exactly what you're going to help me figure out how to do." Ryan sat in the chair. "I made some calls last night. While you were driving. Before I left. Hands free," he added at the expression on her face. "Who did you call?" "A retired sheriff who knows Montana law better than most practicing attorneys. An attorney who specializes in exactly this kind of case. And an investigator who's going to spend the weekend finding out everything there is to find out about Jason Mercer." Emily looked at him for a long moment. "You did all that before you got here. I had 300 miles and I knew we were going to need it." She was quiet for a moment. Not shocked, Ryan had always been 3 steps ahead of a crisis. It was part of what made him effective and occasionally maddening as a brother. But hearing it laid out like that, the systematic, deliberate architecture of it felt different than she'd expected. It felt like solid ground. "What does the attorney say I need?" she asked. Ryan told her. She listened without interrupting, and as he talked, she was also internally cross-referencing everything he said against her own memory, the texts she had saved because something in her had known, even during the worst of it, that she should save them. The photographs on a separate phone she kept hidden in a coffee can in the back of the cabinet above the refrigerator, the one place Jason never looked because he never cooked. The financial records she had quietly photocopied twice over the past 3 months and stored in 2 different locations. She had been preparing without letting herself admit she was preparing. Some survival part of her had been doing the work even while the rest of her was still trying to believe it wasn't as bad as it was. "I have more than you think," she said when Ryan finished. He looked at her. "I've been saving things," she said, "for a while, not because I had a plan. I didn't have a plan, but She stopped. "I kept thinking that if I ever needed to prove it, I should be able to. And so I saved things." Ryan was quiet for a moment. His expression was very controlled. "Okay," he said, "then we start there." The curtain moved. Jason Mercer stepped into the bay. He had not gone home. Ryan could see that immediately there was a slight settling in the too careful way he'd arranged himself, the way men look when they've spent the night in an uncomfortable chair, running revisions on a story they need to tell. He was still in the same clothes. He'd done something with his hair in a hospital bathroom. His face had been arranged into an expression of tired, devoted concern. He looked at Emily first, then he saw Ryan. A half-beat of very well-managed surprise. He looked at Emily. "My brother," Emily said. Her voice was perfectly neutral. "Ryan, this is Jason. Jason, this is my brother, Ryan." Jason extended his hand. His face made the adjustments, quickly surprise, becoming warmth. Warmth becoming the slightly overdone sincerity of a man recalibrating in real time. "Ryan, I've heard so much about you. I'm so sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." Ryan looked at the hand for 1 second. He shook it briefly because Emily was watching and he had made a promise. "Likewise," Ryan said. Jason looked back at Emily. The hand that had just shaken Ryan's went to Emily's shoulder, and Ryan watched Emily hold very, very still under that touch. Baby, Jason said in a lowered voice that had probably worked on her many times before. How are you feeling? I've been out there all night. I was so worried. I'm okay, Emily said. I feel terrible about this. The walkway, I should have salted it the minute the temperature dropped. I don't know why I waited. Jason, Emily's voice was quiet. I'm really tired, and I need to talk to Ryan for a little while. Can you give us some time? A pause, something moved behind Jason's eyes. Calculation, rapid and minute, the kind that happened too fast to catch unless you were looking for it. Ryan was looking for it. Of course, Jason said warmly. Of course, I'll go get some coffee. You two take your time. He squeezed Emily's shoulder, and Ryan watched the tendon in Emily's jaw, the small and involuntary tightening of it. I'll be right outside. He looked at Ryan once more on the way out. A different look than the one he'd shown Emily, shorter, more direct. An assessment. Ryan met it and held it without expression. The curtain swung closed. Emily waited 5 seconds. He's going to listen, she said quietly. I know. Don't say anything you don't want him to hear. Ryan looked at her. This woman who was 26 years old and had spent 10 months surviving something that should never have been hers to survive, and who was sitting in a hospital bed with a fractured arm and was still running tactical calculations. I'm proud of you, he said. I want to say that now because I don't know when I'll get another chance to say it without context. Emily looked at him. Her composure held. It held for a long time. And then very quietly it didn't. She didn't cry the way people cry in movies. She cried the way people cry when they've been holding it for too long, with her hand over her mouth and her shoulders curved inward, and it lasted maybe 40 seconds, and Ryan sat beside her and said nothing and put his hand on her back and kept it there. 40 seconds, then she straightened. She took a breath. She wiped her face with the back of her right hand. Okay, she said. Okay, Ryan said. Tell me what we do first. And he did. The hospital discharged Emily at 10:47 Saturday morning. The paperwork took longer than it should have because the attending physician, Dr. Avery, who had worked the overnight and was technically 12 minutes past the end of his shift, kept finding small reasons to extend the process. Another form to review, a follow-up instruction sheet he wanted to go over personally, a referral to an orthopedic specialist he needed to print from a specific terminal that was apparently malfunctioning. Ryan noticed. He said nothing. He was grateful. Jason stood in the corridor outside the discharge bay with his jacket folded over one arm, looking like a man who had somewhere important to be, and was choosing visibly and generously not to go there. He checked his watch twice in the span of 20 minutes. Both times he caught himself doing it and made his face do something warm and patient. Ryan watched all of it from the chair in the corner. When Dr. Avery finally ran out of legitimate reasons to delay, he shook Emily's right hand at the doorway to the discharge bay and held it a moment longer than a handshake required. He looked at her directly. The number on that referral sheet, he said, is for the orthopedic clinic. But the second number on the back, that's a direct line. You can call it any time, for anything. Emily looked at him. Thank you, Dr. Avery. Take care of yourself, he said. He didn't look at Jason on his way back down the corridor. Jason stepped forward and put his hand on the small of Emily's back, and she moved with it because she had learned over 10 months that resisting small things cost energy she needed to save for the things that mattered. Ryan fell into step on her other side, and they walked out through the front entrance together, the three of them in a configuration that must have looked from the outside like two men who cared about the same woman. The parking lot was cold and white and absolutely ordinary. I'll bring the car around, Jason said, already moving. The moment he was 20 feet away, Ryan said quietly, Don't go home with him. I know. You don't have to explain it. You can just... I know, Ryan, I've thought about it. She adjusted the sling on her left arm. If I don't go back to the house, he'll know something's changed. I need 2 days where he thinks everything is normal. I'll be fine for 2 days. He won't touch me again right now. He never does right after. He goes into the repair phase. Her voice was perfectly flat when she said it, the flat of someone describing a weather pattern they had observed enough times to predict. He'll be attentive and careful, and he'll cook dinner, and he'll apologize 6 different ways without ever actually apologizing. I've seen this version of him before. Ryan looked at her profile. I need you to trust me on this part, she said. He didn't like it. She could see that he didn't like it in the set of his jaw and the way he was holding his hands very still at his sides. But she had asked him to trust her, and he was going to because that was the kind of man Ryan Carter was, the kind who understood the difference between what he wanted to do and what someone he loved was asking him to do. 2 days, he said, 2 days. You call me anytime, any hour. I will. Jason pulled up in a silver Audi. He got out and opened the passenger door and took Emily's good arm to help her in carefully with a gentleness that was technically indistinguishable from the real thing. Ryan stood in the parking lot and watched the car leave. He stood there for a long time after it was gone. Then he called Marcus Webb. Tell me you have something, he said. It's been 8 hours, Carter. I know how long it's been. Marcus made a sound that might have been a sigh. I have the beginning of something. His licensing history is clean on the surface. No formal complaints filed with the state board. But I found 3 women in the past 6 years who filed initial complaints and then withdrew them. 3. Same pattern each time: complaint, filed, then retracted within 2 weeks, always with a brief statement about a misunderstanding. Ryan was quiet. That's not nothing, Marcus said. No, Ryan said. That's not nothing at all. I'm going to reach out carefully to see if any of them want to talk. Nothing pushy, I'll go through channels. But if even one of them is willing to put something on the record, do it, Ryan said. Whatever they need, whatever makes it easier for them to say what happened. Understood. Give me until tomorrow night. Ryan hung up. He called Patricia Osei. 3 prior complaints, he said when she answered, all withdrawn. Patricia was silent for a beat. That's a pattern. That's what I thought. If we can get even one of them to make a supporting statement, not testify, not go public, just provide a written account that corroborates the pattern, that changes the landscape considerably. A licensing board looking at one complaint looks at a possible misunderstanding. A licensing board looking at 4 complaints across 6 years with a documented injury looks at a predator who's been working the system. How do we protect Emily while this is being built? Does she have a safe place to go after the 2 days? She'll have my place if she wants it. She won't want it. He knew Emily well enough to know that she would want her own space, her own air, her own definition of safe. But she'll need somewhere that isn't his house. Tell her to document the 2 days, Patricia said. Everything. Any conversation, any text, if he says anything, anything apologetic, anything that could be read as an admission, she needs to write it down immediately with the time and the context. Can she do that? She's been doing it for months, Ryan said. She just didn't know she was preparing. Patricia was quiet for a moment. She sounds like a remarkable person. Ryan looked at the empty road where the silver Audi had been. She is, he said. Joanne. The 2 days were the longest of Ryan Carter's life. He drove to Pine Ridge and checked into a motel on the edge of town, a clean, unremarkable place where he paid cash and gave a name that wasn't his, not because it was necessary, but because he'd long since developed the habit of not leaving footprints he hadn't intended to leave. He told Danny where he was. He told no one else. He waited. Emily texted him, short messages, regular intervals, the kind of text that could look like ordinary sibling contact to anyone who checked her phone. Having soup. How are you? Just got back from the pharmacy. Cold out, he made pasta. You would have hated it. You always hated capellini. That one made him almost smile because it was true and because it was so specifically Emily, the way she compressed normalcy into the most mundane details, the way she had always been able to say the most important things sideways. He texted back in kind. Weather observations. A question about an old movie they'd both watched as kids. Nothing that meant anything if someone else read it. On Saturday evening, she called him from the bathroom with the shower running. He could hear the water behind her voice and spoke quickly and quietly. He apologized twice at dinner, she said. Not direct apologies, the kind where you're apologized to, but the word sorry is never actually used. What did he say? He said he'd been under a lot of pressure at work, and he knew that wasn't an excuse and he was going to do better. And then he said the thing about the driveway again, about how it was his fault for not salting it. Ryan's grip tightened on the phone. He's maintaining the story. Of course he is. He needs us both on the same page before I can talk to anyone. She paused. He also asked me twice today if I'd spoken to anyone. Family, friends. He asked it casually both times, like it was just conversation. He knows something's different. He senses something. He doesn't know yet. Another pause. Water running. I found 2 more months of bank statements today that I hadn't copied yet. I took photographs of them. Where are you storing them? Not on anything he can access. Don't worry about that part. Emily. Ryan, I know how he thinks. I have known for a long time exactly how he thinks. That's how I've survived this long. Her voice was steady, completely steady. Let me finish what I started. He let her. Todd, no. Sunday passed with the specific weight of a day when you're waiting for something that matters. Ryan spent most of it in the motel on his phone going over everything Marcus sent him in a series of encrypted messages throughout the day. What Marcus had found, piece by careful piece, was the architecture of a man who had been doing this for a very long time and had become very good at not leaving obvious traces. The 3 prior complaints to the licensing board were only the beginning. One of Jason's former clients, a woman named Teresa Langford, 61, widowed from Bozeman, had closed her investment account with his firm 2 years ago after a series of unauthorized transactions that she'd ultimately declined to report because, as she told Marcus when he reached her through a mutual contact, she'd been afraid no one would believe her. A man she'd known from a previous job had mentioned seeing Emily at a function once and made a comment that had lodged in Marcus's memory something about how Mercer's girlfriend seemed different since they'd started dating. Quieter. Quieter. Marcus had underlined that word in his report. Ryan read it 3 times. The most significant piece arrived Sunday at 6 in the evening. One of the 3 women who had withdrawn her complaint, a 33-year-old woman named Dana Rice from Kalispell, had agreed to speak with Marcus briefly through a mutual attorney off the record. She hadn't withdrawn her complaint, she said, because of a misunderstanding. She'd withdrawn it because Jason had come to her apartment 3 days after she filed it, knocked on her door, and sat at her kitchen table for 45 minutes, being the most reasonable, kind, and thoroughly unsettling person she had ever encountered. He hadn't threatened her, not explicitly. He had simply talked about what her life looked like and what it could look like, and somewhere in those 45 minutes, she had become very clearly aware that he knew things about her schedule and her habits and the people in her life that a man who didn't mean anything by it should not have known. She had withdrawn the complaint the next morning. She hadn't spoken about it since. Until now. Ryan read the full account, 3 pages of careful notes in Marcus's compact handwriting, sent as a photograph. Then he called Patricia. We have a witness, he said, indirect. She's not going to testify, but she'll provide a written statement about what happened after she filed her complaint. Patricia absorbed this. That's witness intimidation, she said. If she's willing to document what he did after the complaint, she's willing, through her own attorney, not directly. Ryan, that changes everything. Patricia's voice had shifted into its working register. A licensing board looking at a pattern of complaints, a documented injury, financial misconduct with a client, and now evidence of witness intimidation. That's not a man who made some mistakes. That's a man who has been systematically doing this to women and using his professional position to do it. The board doesn't just pull licenses for that. They refer to law enforcement. What about Emily? Emily's case, with everything she's gathered, is the centerpiece. The rest corroborates. But it's her evidence, her records, her documentation. That's what makes it specific and recent and legally actionable. Patricia paused. How is she? She's ready, Ryan said. Does she know what Monday is going to look like? I'm calling her tonight to go over it. Tell her to get some sleep first. What she does Monday is going to take everything she has. Ryan said he would. He hung up and sat in the quiet of the motel room for a while, turning a bottle of water in his hands without opening it. He thought about Jason Mercer sitting at Dana Rice's kitchen table, being perfectly reasonable, knowing everything about her schedule. He thought about the way Jason had looked in the hospital bay, the half-beat of managed surprise, the immediate recalibration, the hand on Emily's shoulder, and the way Emily had held herself completely still underneath it. He had promised Emily he wouldn't touch the man. He kept the promise. He kept it every ambush that weekend, and it cost him more than he let himself show. He called Emily at 9 o'clock Sunday night. She was in the bathroom again, water running. Tomorrow, he said, walk me through what you have. She did. Methodically, in order, without drama, the text messages she had screenshotted and saved, organized by date going back 8 months. The financial records showing 2 transfers from her personal savings account into a joint account she hadn't agreed to open. The photographs of her arm taken at the hospital by a nurse with timestamps before the cast was applied. The written notes she had kept in a password-protected document on a phone Jason didn't know she had notes, from 63 separate incidents dated, described with physical and emotional detail that was so specific and so consistent, it was almost unbearable to read. 63 incidents. She had documented 63 separate incidents while continuing to live in the same house as the man who had caused them. When she finished, Ryan didn't speak for a moment. Emily, he said. I know, she said quietly. I don't know if I can tell you. You don't have to, she said. Just tell me what we do tomorrow. He told her. He went through it, all the timing, the location, what Patricia had advised, what documents she needed to bring in, what form, what she should say, and crucially, what she should not say until she was in the room and ready. She listened without interrupting. When he was done, she said, who else is going to be there? That depends on you. A silence. I want Danny there, she said. Outside, not in the building, but I want to know he's there. Ryan blinked. In all of his years of knowing Danny Falk, he had never once heard Emily ask for him specifically. They'd met 4 times, maybe 5. He scared me when I was 15, Emily said. He knocked on the front door to pick you up, and I thought he was the most intimidating person I'd ever seen. And then he saw that I was scared, and he said, she stopped, a small sound, almost a laugh. He said, don't worry, kid. Your brother's an idiot, but he's got good taste in friends. And I laughed, and I wasn't scared anymore. Ryan was quiet. I want that version of intimidating tomorrow, Emily said. The kind that makes the right people feel safe and the wrong people understand the situation. I'll call him tonight, Ryan said. Good. A breath. Ryan, yeah. I need you to know something. Tell me. I made myself believe for a long time that I couldn't use the code, that it wasn't bad enough yet, that I was handling it. She paused. And I kept thinking, what does bad enough look like? What does it have to be before it counts? Ryan said nothing. He knew this was not a place where words helped. The night he broke my arm, Emily said. When I was sitting in his car on the way to the hospital, I kept thinking this is what I was waiting for. The thing that would make it real enough, and I was so angry at myself for waiting that long. She stopped. I need you to know that I'm done waiting for things to be bad enough. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm done. I know, Ryan said. I just needed to say it out loud to someone who would understand. I understand, he said, and the code worked exactly like Grandpa said it would. You said the words. I came. That's how it was supposed to go. A silence. Get some sleep, he said. You too, she said. They both knew neither of them would. Monday morning arrived the way important mornings always do, unremarkably the world continuing its ordinary business without acknowledgement of what was about to happen inside it. Ryan was up at 5. He showered, dressed, called Danny at 5:15. Danny answered on the first ring, which meant he'd been up too. She wants you there, Ryan said. Outside the building. You don't go in. I know the difference, Danny said. She specifically asked for you. A pause. She did. She remembered something you said to her when she was 15. Another pause longer. I'll be there, Danny said. How many of us? Ryan thought about it. Patricia's advice had been clear. This was not a show of force. But there was a difference between force and presence, and Emily had been living for 10 months inside the specific fear of a man who had made her feel like she had no one. Today she needed to see that she had people. Not people who would do anything on her behalf, just people who were there. 8, Ryan said. Enough to be visible, not enough to look like a threat. 8 it is. 9 o'clock. I'll send you the address. He sent the address. He sat in the motel room and watched the window get lighter and drank bad coffee from the machine in the hallway and thought about his grandfather's kitchen and the smell of pine trees and the particular quality of early morning in Montana, which was different from every other kind of morning, colder and quieter and more honest. At 7:30, his phone buzzed. A text from Emily. I'm ready. Are you? He typed back, yes. Call me when you're leaving. 7 minutes later, he wants to drive me. Ryan's stomach tightened. He typed, tell him you need the walk, or that you're meeting me first. A pause. Then I told him I'm meeting you for breakfast. He asked where. Ryan, and tell him Donna's Diner, corner of 5th and Main. Another pause. He's looking it up. Ryan, good. There's no Donna's Diner. 30 seconds. Then he smiled, said that sounds nice. He's going to the office first. Ryan let out a slow breath. When does he expect you at his office, Emily? 10 o'clock. That's when he thinks we're having a conversation. Ryan will be there at 9:45, Emily. I know. And then after a moment, Ryan, thank you. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said the only thing that was true. I should have come sooner. Her response came back immediately. You came when I called. That's what matters. At 8:55, Ryan Carter stood on the sidewalk outside the Mercer Financial Group building in downtown Pine Ridge and looked at the street. On one side, 4 motorcycles. On the other, 4 more. They were parked correctly legally in marked spaces, their riders standing beside them or sitting on low walls nearby. 8 men in Hell's Angels cuts who were doing nothing at all except being present. No engines, no posturing, no noise of any kind. Danny Falk was leaning against the wall nearest the building entrance, arms folded, saying nothing. He had the specific quality of stillness that very large men develop when they want to convey that their stillness is a choice. People on the street noticed. Of course they noticed. A few slowed. A few took wider paths around the motorcycles. Several looked very quickly and then looked away, the instinctive human recalibration that happens when you walk into a situation that tells you something significant is occurring and you're not sure what role you're supposed to play in it. No one said anything. No one was given a reason to. Ryan looked at the building's front entrance. At 9:42, Emily Carter walked around the corner. She was wearing her good coat. Her left arm was in the sling. Her right hand was at her side, and she was carrying a leather portfolio that Ryan knew contained everything printed, organized, tabbed, every piece of evidence, cataloged in the order Patricia had specified. She walked like a woman who had made a decision. She saw Ryan. She stopped for a moment. She looked at the motorcycles on both sides of the street, and then at Danny, who gave her a single unhurried nod. Something moved across her face. Not relief exactly, something more like recognition, the recognition of a person who has spent a long time believing they were alone in something, finally seeing physically and undeniably that they were not. She walked to Ryan. How do you feel? He asked. Terrified, she said. Good, he said. Terrified means you know what's at stake. She looked at him. You're not coming in. I know. This is mine to do. I know that too. She looked at the building entrance. She looked back at him. What if he doesn't sign? Then we do it the harder way. Patricia's already filed the initial complaint with the licensing board. Marcus's report goes to law enforcement if he refuses. The other women's statements are ready. This is the easy path for him, the one that ends quietly. If he decides he doesn't want the easy path, Ryan held her gaze. We let him choose the hard one. Emily nodded. She adjusted the portfolio under her right arm. Ryan, she said. Yeah. If this works, she stopped. Started again. When this works, I'm going to need a while to figure out what comes after. I don't exactly know what I'm going to be there on my other side of today. You're going to be Emily, he said. Just Emily, without all the extra weight. She looked at him for a moment with an expression he couldn't entirely read. Then she turned and walked toward the building entrance. Danny opened the door for her, not with ceremony, just held it naturally the way you hold a door for someone. She walked through it. Ryan watched the door close. He went to stand with Danny beside the wall, and he put his hands in his jacket pockets, and he watched the entrance, and he thought about a 9-year-old girl in their grandfather's kitchen learning a code she hoped she'd never need, and a code phrase that had crossed 300 miles of Montana night in a whisper in a phone borrowed from a stranger, and everything that had been quietly built over 2 days and was right now being carried into a room by one woman with a leather portfolio and the specific, unshakable courage of someone who had decided they were done. He waited. Above them, the morning was cold and clear, and the sky over Pine Ridge was the particular blue that only exists in Montana in January, that high, thin, almost unreal blue that makes the world look like something that was created on purpose. Ryan Carter stood on the sidewalk and waited for his sister to come back through that door. He had never been more certain of anything in his life than he was certain, standing there, that when she came out, everything was going to be different. He was right. The elevator in the Mercer Financial Group building took 45 seconds to reach the 4th floor. Emily counted them. She had always counted things when she was afraid steps, ceiling tiles, seconds. It was something she'd started doing as a kid, some childhood instinct toward control that had never fully left her, and it had served her well over the past 10 months in ways she hadn't expected. When Jason's voice got the particular quality that meant something was about to happen, she counted. When she was sitting across from him at dinner, trying to track every micro-expression on his face, she counted. Counting gave the brain an anchor, something to hold on to while the rest of you navigated the flood. 45 seconds, 4 floors. She could do this. The elevator opened onto a carpeted hallway that she had walked down many times before, had walked down with her hand in Jason's, had walked down to pick him up for lunch, had walked down on the evening 6 months ago when he'd hosted a client appreciation dinner, and she had stood beside him for 3 hours, saying exactly the right things to exactly the right people, while her ribs were still bruised from 4 days earlier. She walked it now alone with her portfolio under her right arm, and it felt completely different. Not because the hallway had changed, because she had. The receptionist at the front desk of Mercer Financial was a young woman named Kelsey, who had always been friendly to Emily in the particular way of someone who worked for a man she admired and extended that admiration by proximity to the people in his life. She looked up when Emily pushed through the glass door. "Emily, hi, I didn't know you were coming in." "Is he in?" Emily said. Something in Emily's tone made Kelsey pause. Not rude, just direct in a way that didn't match the Emily she'd known. "He's in his office. Do you want me to let him know?" "No," Emily said. "Thank you." She walked past the desk toward the closed door at the end of the hall. She heard Kelsey pick up her phone behind her. She didn't look back. She knocked once. "Come in." Jason was behind his desk. He was in his Monday clothes, the full performance of financial professionalism, the suit that had been chosen specifically to communicate trustworthiness, the watch that said successful without shouting it. He had a client file open in front of him and a coffee cup at his right elbow, and he looked from the doorway like a man with no particular concerns about the morning ahead. He looked up. Something shifted in his face, not quite surprise, not quite relief, some calculation in between. "Em," he stood. "I thought you were meeting Ryan for breakfast." "I did," she said. "Now I'm here." She walked to the chair across from his desk and sat down. She set the portfolio on her lap. She had rehearsed this moment approximately 200 times in her head over the past 48 hours, and the rehearsal had helped. But the real thing was different from any rehearsal in the same way. A wave is different from water in a glass. It was the same substance, but it had mass and movement, and it was coming at her. She let it come. "How's your arm?" Jason asked, coming around the desk. His voice had the careful warmth of the repair phase, the attentiveness she'd described to Ryan. He reached toward her. "Don't," she said. He stopped. Just one word and the room changed. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not anger, not yet, but the first awareness that this morning was not going to go the way he had organized it. He retreated back around the desk and sat down. He was still managing his expression, but he was managing it now, which was different from wearing it naturally. "Okay," he said, slow, easy. "Talk to me." Emily opened the portfolio. She placed the first document on his desk. It was a printed summary, 1 page prepared by Patricia Osei, outlining the legal options available to Emily Carter as a documented victim of domestic violence in the state of Montana. She had not written it to threaten. She had placed it first because she needed Jason to understand immediately that this was not a conversation. This was a presentation. He looked at the document without touching it. His jaw moved slightly. He was reading fast. "What is this?" he said. "Not a question." "The beginning," Emily said. She placed the second document. The medical record from Pine Ridge General, the x-ray report, the attending physician's notes, the 3 separate points in Dr. Avery's documentation, where the phrase, "an injury inconsistent with stated mechanism," appeared. Jason looked at it. He said nothing. The third document was the financial record. The 2 unauthorized transfers from Emily's savings account, highlighted with the account numbers visible, and the dates clearly marked. The fourth was 8 pages of printed text messages, each one annotated in the margin, with a brief note isolating language. October 4th. Financial control, November 12th. Threat implicit, December 3rd. Jason was still. The particular stillness of a man who is processing something faster than he wants anyone to see him processing it. "Emily," he said. His voice had changed registers, quieter now and careful in a new way. I don't know what someone has told you, but nobody told me anything, she said. I wrote it down. I have been writing it down for 8 months. Everything that happened with the date and the time and what you said and what you did and what it felt like afterward. She placed the fifth document, the printed summary of her personal record, 63 incidents, the pages clipped neatly together in the upper left corner. 63 separate incidents, Jason. I documented 63 of them. He stared at the stack of documents on his desk. I'd like you to read them, Emily said. Take whatever time you need. He didn't touch them. He looked at her instead, and she recognized this look she had seen it deployed at other people. Never quite at her, the look he used when someone surprised him, and he was deciding how to reclassify them. He was reclassifying her right now. She could see it happening. You had help with this, he said. Ryan. Ryan helped me understand my legal options. I gathered the evidence myself over 8 months before I ever called him. Every document in this portfolio was collected by me, organized by me, and is from sources you cannot challenge. She held his gaze. Ryan drove 300 miles to make sure I could walk into this room without being afraid. He's outside right now. He's not coming in. Jason's eyes went to the window. He calculated something. Emily, listen to me. I have been listening to you for 10 months, she said. I need you to listen to me now. He closed his mouth. She laid out the terms. She had memorized them from Patricia's instruction, not read them from paper. Memorized them because she needed to be looking at him when she said them, and she needed him to understand that these words were hers, not a script someone had handed her. He would submit his resignation to the state licensing board within 48 hours, citing personal reasons with no contest to the pending complaint that had been filed that morning. He would close the joint account he had opened without her consent and return the full amount of both unauthorized transfers with interest. He would have no contact with her, no calls, no texts, no appearances at locations she frequented. Nothing direct or through intermediaries. He would provide a written statement, signed and notarized, acknowledging what had occurred in the relationship. If he complied with all 4 conditions, Emily would not pursue criminal charges at this time. She reserved the right to revisit that decision if he violated any term. If he declined everything in the portfolio, plus the supporting statements from 3 additional women, and the witness intimidation documentation from Dana Rice would be delivered simultaneously to the Cascade County Sheriff's Office, the Montana Division of Securities, the state licensing board, and the civil court. She finished. She folded her hands on top of the portfolio. She waited. Jason was looking at the desk. He had gone a color she had never seen on him, not red, not white, but a kind of gray that happened when the blood decided to redistribute itself away from the face. Dana Rice, he said very quietly. Yes, Emily said. She wouldn't. She did. A silence. 30 seconds of it. Emily counted. She had nowhere to be. I need time, Jason said. You have until Wednesday at 5 p.m., Emily said. Patricia Ose's contact information is on the last page. Your attorney can reach her directly. Any questions about the legal specifics, go through them. She stood up. She picked up the portfolio. The original documents were in the portfolio Jason had been reading, copies of details she had not mentioned. She tucked it under her right arm. Emily. His voice had dropped into something she hadn't heard from him before. Not the charm register, not the management register, not even the anger register. Something underneath all of those. I never meant don't, she said. Please. You can say whatever you need to say to your attorney and to the licensing board and to yourself at 3 a.m. I don't need to hear it. She walked to the door. I loved you, he said behind her. She stopped. She stood with her hand on the door frame for exactly 3 seconds. Then she opened the door and walked out. She walked past Kelsey's desk. Kelsey was on the phone, looked up, registered something in Emily's face and went very still. She walked down the hallway. She pressed the elevator button. She stood and waited, and when it came, she stepped inside and turned around to face the doors as they closed. The elevator took 45 seconds. She counted every one. When the doors opened on the ground floor and she walked through the lobby and pushed through the front entrance into the cold January air, Ryan was standing 12 feet away on the sidewalk, and he read her face in the first half second and took 1 step toward her. She held up her right hand. Stop. He stopped. She took a breath. Another. He heard me, she said, everything. How did he react? He tried 4 different approaches in about 90 seconds and none of them worked, and then he heard Dana Rice's name and he stopped trying. she exhaled. He needs time. He doesn't have much of it. He knows that. She looked up at the sky. The Montana January blue was still up there, clear and enormous. He said he loved me. Ryan was quiet. Right at the end, when I was walking out, she lowered her gaze. I don't know if he was saying it because he believes it or because he thought it would work. And the fact that I can't tell the difference, she stopped. That's the thing I'm going to be thinking about for a while. Yeah, Ryan said, probably. She looked at him. That's not a very comforting response. You didn't ask me to comfort you. You were thinking out loud. She almost smiled. Almost. Fair enough. Danny came off the wall. He stopped a few feet away, that same unhurried quality as the day before, the stillness that was a choice. You okay? He said. Emily looked at him. This man she had met 5 times who had said the exact right thing to a 15-year-old girl who was scared of him. I'll get there, she said. Danny nodded. That's the answer, he said. That's always the right answer. They moved Emily out of Jason's house that afternoon. It took 2 hours and 30 minutes. She had fewer things than she expected. The accumulation of a relationship that had been slowly constraining, slowly reducing the space she was allowed to take up, meant that many of the things that had once been hers had been gradually relocated or replaced, or simply stopped being purchased without her ever quite noticing the pattern. She noticed it now, standing in the house for the last time, while Ryan and Danny carried boxes and 3 other men sat outside on their bikes, not being asked to do anything, and doing it with considerable presence. She walked through the rooms and she identified what was hers and what wasn't, and the line between those 2 categories was clearer than she would have expected. Her grandmother's quilt from the closet shelf, the coffee can from the cabinet above the refrigerator. She took the hidden phone out and the photographs and put them in her bag and left the can. Her books, her clothes, her mother's photograph that had lived on the nightstand and that Jason had moved to the hall closet 3 months into the relationship without explaining why. And she had not moved back because by then she had already learned that taking up that particular kind of space cost more than it was worth. She took the photograph from the hall closet. She held it for a moment, her mother standing in front of a pine tree somewhere outside Billings, squinting into summer light and laughing at something the camera had caught her mid-sentence about. She put it in the box with the quilt. That everything? Ryan asked from the doorway. One more thing, Emily said. She went to the kitchen. She opened the cabinet below the sink and she pulled out from behind the cleaning supplies a small notebook, spiral-bound blue, cover the kind sold 3 for $1 in drugstores everywhere. She had bought it with Keith from a store 1 town over 8 months ago, paid for with money taken from the grocery budget in amounts small enough to go unnoticed. And she had filled it in pencil because pencil could be erased if he ever found it, and she could say it was a grocery list. But it wasn't a grocery list. It was every date and every incident and every detail of the things she had been living inside, written small and close, and in a handwriting that looked nothing like her regular handwriting because she had changed it specifically in case he saw it. She held it in her right hand. This is what I was keeping, she said, not to Ryan specifically. Not to anyone, just said it the way you say things that need to be said out loud to become real. This is what I made sure to keep. She put it in her bag. They left. Jason's car was not in the driveway. He had been there when they arrived. She had seen the car, and by the time she came back downstairs with the second box, it was gone. He had left without confrontation, without spectacle, and that was the Jason Mercer she had always been most afraid of, not the one who exploded, but the one who quietly recalculated. She registered his absence and she filed it, and she kept moving. Emily spent the first night in a motel on the edge of town, same one as Ryan, different room. He had offered her a choice and she had chosen proximity over comfort, which was not the choice he'd expected. She said, I've been alone with it for 10 months. I don't want to be alone with it tonight. So they sat in the small motel breakfast area at 9 o'clock in the evening, plastic chairs and a vending machine humming in the corner. Bad coffee, the overhead light doing its indifferent work, and they talked. Not about the case, not about Jason, not about what came next or what the attorney needed or what the licensing board would do. They talked about their grandfather and the ranch outside Billings and the summer they'd both spent there when Emily was 12 and Ryan was 27, and he'd tried to teach her to ride a dirt bike, and she'd put it into a fence post on the 3rd attempt, and they'd both laughed until they couldn't stand up. They talked about their mother, who had been gone 7 years, and whose laugh was one of those specific, irreplaceable things that existed only in memory now that no photograph could fully recreate. They talked about small things, unimportant things, the way siblings talk when they've been apart too long and need to remind themselves of who they are to each other beneath everything that has happened. At 11:30, Emily said, "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "Okay." "When you drove here that night after I called, when you were on the highway," she looked at her coffee cup, "were you angry at me for not calling sooner?" Ryan was quiet for a moment. "For about 30 seconds, he said. She looked up. "And then I remembered something Grandpa used to say." He turned his own cup in his hands. He said that blame is a luxury and figuring out what happened is a necessity, and you can only do one of them at a time. So I put the 30 seconds down and I started figuring out what happened. Emily looked at him for a long moment. "He was a smart man," she said. "Yeah, he was." She went to her room at midnight. Ryan heard her moving around for a while, water running the creak of the bed, and then quiet. He sat in his own room for another hour, going over the timeline in his head the way he went over anything important, looking for gaps, looking for things that hadn't been accounted for, looking for the places where he should be paying attention. Patricia had said the licensing board would respond to the initial complaint within 10 business days. Marcus had said the supporting documentation from Dana Rice would be formalized through her attorney by Thursday. The financial misconduct documentation involving Teresa Langford had been forwarded to the State Division of Securities as a separate matter that would move on its own timeline. All of it was in motion. What Ryan couldn't account for was Jason Mercer. He had not called Patricia's office. He had not reached out to his own attorney, as far as they could tell. He had simply gone somewhere on Monday afternoon and not come back to the house and not made contact. That bothered Ryan more than noise would have. Quiet people doing quiet things were harder to track and harder to predict. And Jason Mercer was a man who had been quietly doing terrible things for a very long time. The absence of reaction was itself a reaction, and Ryan lay in the thin motel bed, turning it over, trying to read it, trying to decide whether it meant the man was preparing to comply or preparing something else entirely. He was still turning it over when his phone buzzed at 12:47 in the morning. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "I know who you are. I know what she told you. There are things about Emily you don't know. We should talk before this goes any further." Jay Ryan stared at it. He read it twice. He felt the cold, specific anger move through him, and then he set it aside the way he'd been setting things aside for 3 days carefully, one shelf at a time. He photographed the text. He forwarded it to Patricia. He forwarded it to Marcus. He typed one line back to the unknown number. "All communication through Patricia Osei. Her number is on the document Emily gave you." He set his phone on the nightstand. He lay in the dark. Jason had blinked first. The text was proof of that whatever calculated patience he'd been maintaining since Monday morning had cracked just slightly in the specific way that pressure cracks things in the middle of the night when the constructed defenses of the daytime aren't fully operational. He'd reached out, directly, trying to go around the attorney, trying to establish a private channel, trying to reframe the narrative with that one line. "There are things about Emily you don't know," which was the oldest move available, the one that counted on a brother's doubt. Ryan felt no doubt, none at all. He slept 4 hours. When he woke up, Patricia had already replied to his forwarded text. "This is witness contact. I'm documenting it. Don't respond further. This helps us." Tuesday moved quickly. Emily spent most of it on the phone with Patricia going through the documentation piece by piece, and Ryan spent it with Marcus going over the investigative file and identifying the 3 or 4 elements that if Jason chose to fight would need to be shored up further. At 2 in the afternoon, Emily's phone rang. Unknown number. She looked at it. She looked at Ryan. "Don't answer," he said. It rang 6 times, voicemail. She waited 5 minutes. She called the voicemail. She put it on speaker. Jason's voice clean and unhurried, as if he were leaving a message for a client. "Emily, I've been thinking about what you said, and I believe there's a misunderstanding here that we could resolve directly if we talked. I'm not looking for conflict. I care about you. I think you know that. Call me back." The voicemail ended. Emily stared at the phone for a moment. "Misunderstanding," she said. "Yeah," Ryan said. 63 documented incidents and a broken arm, and he's going with misunderstanding. He's going with whatever he thinks might create movement. He's testing." Ryan reached over and took her phone. He forwarded the voicemail to Patricia. He's going to keep testing until he finds something that works or runs out of time. Wednesday at 5 is 49 hours away. Emily took her phone back. She played the voicemail again, listening to it with an expression Ryan couldn't quite read, clinical almost. The way you listen to something you're analyzing rather than feeling. He sounds completely normal, she said when it ended. I know. That's the part that it's so hard to explain to people. He sounds like a perfectly normal, reasonable man who is sad that there's been a misunderstanding. She set the phone on the table. That's what everyone is going to hear when they listen to this. A normal man. And they're going to wonder if maybe Patricia's already heard it, Ryan said. She's heard this voice before. She knows what it is. But the people who don't know are not the people making the decision, Ryan said. The licensing board is going to read 63 documented incidents and a medical report that says your fracture is inconsistent with a fall. The civil court is going to read financial records showing unauthorized transfers. Dana Rice's attorney is going to submit a statement about what happened in her kitchen. He leaned forward. His voice on a voicemail doesn't change any of that. Emily was quiet. I know, she said. I know that. She stopped. I spent 10 months wondering if I was misreading things, wondering if I was the problem. And then I hear his voice, and for about 10 seconds the wondering comes back, and I hate that it comes back. Does it stay? Ryan asked. She thought about it honestly. No, she said, it doesn't stay. Then it's just an echo. It's not a question anymore. She looked at him. How do you do that? She said. Do what? Know exactly what to say. I don't know exactly what to say, Ryan said. I know you. There's a difference. Wednesday arrived. Patricia called at 9 in the morning. Jason's attorney had reached out Tuesday evening late, which Patricia noted was itself a tell requesting an extension of the deadline. Emily said no. Patricia relayed the number. Jason's attorney pushed back with what Patricia described as the standard repertoire. The timeline was unreasonable. Her client needed time to review the documentation thoroughly. There was significant potential for misinterpretation. Patricia had listened politely and said that her client's deadline was 5 o'clock Wednesday and that the documentation required no interpretation beyond its plain meaning. At 2:45 p.m., Jason's attorney called again. At 3:03, Emily's phone rang with Patricia's name. Emily answered it immediately. Ryan was sitting across from her. He watched her face. He watched it change. The call lasted 6 minutes. Emily said almost nothing, a few yes responses, one question he couldn't hear the answer, to one moment where she closed her eyes for 3 seconds and opened them again. When she hung up, she put the phone on the table. She looked at Ryan. He's signing, she said. The words came out very quiet, not triumphant, something more interior than triumph, something that was doing its processing in a place deeper than expression. All 4 terms, Ryan said. All 4. His attorney is asking for one modification. He wants the written acknowledgement to be sealed, not public. Patricia says that's acceptable because we retain a copy and retain the right to unseal if he violates any term. In Patricia's recommendation, she says take it. She says the modification doesn't protect him from anything that matters. What matters is the signed document exists. Ryan nodded. The signing is at 4 o'clock, Emily said. At Patricia's office. I don't have to be there. She'll handle it. Do you want to be there? Emily thought about it for a moment. No, she said. I don't need to see him sign it. I just need it to be signed. Ryan looked at her. Okay. That's it, she said. Just okay. What did you want me to say? She almost laughed. Not quite. Almost. I thought there'd be more. I thought it would feel bigger. It's only 4 o'clock, Ryan said. Give it some time. At 4:22, Patricia texted Emily one word. Done. Emily stared at the text. She read it 3 more times the way you read something your brain is having trouble filing correctly because it doesn't have an existing category for it. Done. He'd signed it. The man who had twisted her arm until the bone snapped and then smiled at the nurses and then sent her a voicemail about misunderstandings had sat in a lawyer's office and signed 4 documents that dismantled piece by piece the structure he had built his control on. Done. She put her phone face down on the table. She put her right hand over her eyes. Ryan let her have the silence. He sat across from her and he let it be quiet, and he looked at the table and he thought about their grandfather, who had taught 2 kids a code that one of them had carried for 15 years without ever needing it and then had needed it absolutely at the exact moment when everything was breaking, and the only person who could hear her was 300 miles away. He had come when she called. That was the promise. That was the only promise that had ever mattered. Emily took her hand from her eyes. She looked at him. Her eyes were red at the edges, but dry. She had run out of a certain kind of tears somewhere in the past 72 hours, and what was left was something quieter. "Ryan," she said. "Yeah." "I need to call someone else," she said. "I need to call Dana Rice." He blinked. "Why?" Because she sat across from him at her kitchen table and was afraid, and she withdrew her complaint, and she probably has spent 2 years wondering if she made the right call. Emily picked up her phone. "She helped me today. She put something in writing that she had been too afraid to say out loud, and it helped me. And I need her to know that it mattered." Ryan looked at her for a long moment. "Marcus can get you her number," he said. "I know. Can you call him?" He called Marcus. He got the number. He handed his phone to Emily, who dialed it and waited. A woman's voice answered, cautious. "Ms. Rice," Emily said. "My name is Emily Carter. I think you know who I am." A pause on the line. Then very quietly, "Yes." "I wanted to call you personally," Emily said, "because what you did took courage that you didn't have to spend on someone you'd never met, and I didn't want that to go unsaid." She paused. "He signed today. All 4 terms. It's over." The silence on the line was long. When Dana Rice's voice came back, it was different from before, thinner and shaking very slightly. "It's really over," she said. "It's really over," Emily said. "For both of us." Another silence. Ryan could hear faintly the sound of a breath being let out on the other end of the line, a long, slow exhale, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and has been waiting a long time for permission. "Thank you," Dana said, "for calling. You didn't have to." "I know," Emily said. "That's why I wanted to." She hung up. She sat with Ryan's phone in her hand for a moment, and then she set it on the table next to her own. She looked out the window. "You know what I want right now?" she said. "What?" "I want to go somewhere that doesn't have anything to do with any of this. I want to eat something that isn't motel food. And I want to not talk about Jason Mercer for at least 3 hours. Ryan stood up. "I know a place," he said. "Does it have good pie?" "It has the best pie in Cascade County." "Let's go," she said. She was halfway to the door when she stopped. She turned around. She picked up the blue spiral notebook from her bag, the one with the changed handwriting. The grocery list disguised the 63 dates and times, and she held it. She looked at it for a moment. Then she put it back in her bag, carefully, not throwing it away, keeping it, because it was hers and what was written in it had happened to her, and she had the right to decide what to do with it in her own time. That decision belonged to her. She zipped the bag. She walked out the door and into the cold, and Ryan was right behind her, and the day was still the same. January blue. It had been all week, enormous and honest and indifferent, the way Montana sky always was, and Emily Carter walked under it with her arm in a sling and her bag over her shoulder, and the particular quality of a person who has set something down that they have been carrying for a very long time. Not healed, not finished, not all the way through it yet, but walking. That was enough for today. The pie was apple, and it was exactly as good as Ryan had said it was. They sat in a corner booth of a diner called Merle's, which had been operating in the same building, in the same town, under the same family's ownership since 1974, and which smelled like coffee and butter, and the specific warm exhaustion of a place that had fed a lot of people through a lot of difficult things and didn't make a production of it. The waitress, a woman somewhere in her late 60s named Carol, who wore her reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck and called everyone honey without condescension, brought 2 slices of apple pie with a scoop of vanilla on each and refilled their coffee before either of them asked. Emily ate half her slice before she said anything meaningful. Ryan let her. He had learned a long time ago that Emily processed things at her own pace, and that silence offered generously was worth more than conversation offered prematurely. "I keep waiting for it to feel different," she said finally. "What do you mean?" "I thought when it was over I would feel, I don't know, light, like something had been lifted." She looked at her mom. "And there's something that's different, but it doesn't feel the way I thought it would. It feels more like," she searched for the word, "quiet, like the volume got turned down on something that had been running in the background for so long I'd stopped hearing it as noise." Ryan thought about that. That sounds about right, he said. You've seen this before with other people. Enough times. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. The big feeling, the relief, the triumph, all of that, it comes later. After your nervous system figures out that the threat is actually gone. Right now, your body still thinks you need to be ready. She looked at him. That's surprisingly insightful for a man whose primary hobby involves internal combustion engines. Motorcycles are very philosophical, he said. She did laugh then, a real laugh, short and genuine, and it changed her whole face for the 3 seconds it lasted, and it was the best thing Ryan had seen all week. Carol came by with the coffee again. She looked at Emily's arm in the sling briefly without comment and topped up both cups and moved on. Ryan watched her go and thought that there were certain people in the world who had developed through long practice the specific wisdom of knowing when not to ask. What happens now? Emily said. Practically. Walk me through it. Ryan set down his cup. Patricia files the formal documentation with the licensing board tomorrow. They'll open an official investigation that's automatic once a formal complaint is filed, with supporting evidence of this weight. The financial misconduct piece with Teresa Langford moves through the Division of Security separately, which means even if someone tried to slow down the licensing board process, the financial track keeps moving independent of it. Dana Rice's statement is in the file. The medical documentation is in the file. And the signed agreement, Patricia holds it, original notarized witnessed. If he violates any single term anyone, it becomes immediately usable in both criminal and civil proceedings, and the seal comes off the written acknowledgement. Emily absorbed this. So he can't just wait it out. He can't just keep his head down and hope people forget. He resigned his license today as part of Term 1. The resignation is already with the board. Whatever happens in the investigation, he's not practicing. He can't practice in Montana. And because the licensing boards share information across state lines, he's going to have a very difficult time practicing anywhere else. Ryan paused. He's not going to be able to do to someone else what he did to you. Not in any official capacity. That part is done. Emily was quiet for a moment. Tell me about the other women, she said. The ones who filed before. What happens to them? That's not my decision, Ryan said. Marcus made contact through careful channels. Dana chose to participate. The other two haven't responded. That's their right. They get to decide what they want to do with their own experience. But they know now that someone tried. They know they weren't alone in it. Does anyone tell them how it came out? Ryan looked at her. Do you want to? She thought about it for a long moment. I want them to know it's over. I don't need them to know who I am or what I did. I just want them to know that it's done. Marcus can send a message through the same channel. No details. Just that the situation has been resolved. Can you ask him to do that? Tonight, Ryan said. She nodded. She picked up her fork and took another bite of pie. She chewed it slowly and looked somewhere past Ryan's shoulder, somewhere internal. Running through something he could see her running through but couldn't follow. I'm going to need a place to live, she said. I know. I can't go back to that town the same way. I've been thinking about it since Monday morning, and I keep coming back to the same thing. Pine Ridge is Jason's town. He built it that way carefully over years. Everyone who matters in that community knows him and respects him and doesn't know what he is. She paused. They will know eventually. The licensing board process isn't confidential in the way he probably hoped it was. But right now, if I stay in Pine Ridge, I'm the girlfriend who made accusations. I'm the woman with the bikers on the street. I'm the story. So you leave Pine Ridge? I think so. She met his eyes. But I don't want to move to Billings. I wasn't going to suggest it. I know. I just needed to say it. She looked at her coffee. I was thinking Missoula, maybe. It's big enough to be anonymous if I want to be small enough to build something real. Patricia's there. Marcus is there. I'd know people. You'd know me, Ryan said. I'm 3 hours away. That's not the same as next door, but it's not nothing. It's not nothing, she agreed. It's actually a lot. She finished her pie. She sat back in the booth with her good hand wrapped around her coffee cup and the particular posture of someone who is very tired in the way that follows sustained effort. Not the tired of sleeplessness, though that too, but the deeper tired of having been in a state of high alert for a very long time and finally tentatively beginning to let the alert down. Ryan watched her. He had been watching her carefully since Monday morning. Not intrusively, not in the way of someone who didn't trust another person to manage themselves, but in the way of someone who had been scared for 3 days and couldn't quite stop tracking the indicators. Color in her face, steadiness in her voice, whether she was eating, whether she was sleeping. All the small physical signals that in his experience told you more about how a person was actually doing than anything they said. She was doing better than she had been on Saturday morning, considerably better. She was also not fine and would not be fine for a while, and the thing he most wanted to communicate to her and was least sure how to put into words was that both of those things were true simultaneously and neither one canceled the other out. He was still trying to find the words when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Marcus, he answered. Yeah. 2 things, Marcus said. First, the message to the other 2 women has been sent through the same channel I used before. Second, a pause brief, the kind that meant Marcus was choosing his words. I've been doing some additional digging on Mercer, background stuff just to close out the file properly. And he left Pine Ridge this afternoon, about 2 hours after the signing. His office was cleared out, not professionally cleaned out, just personal items removed. His apartment is still under lease, but a neighbor saw him loading a car. Ryan's jaw tightened. Where did he go? I don't know yet. I'm working on it. I don't think he's a flight risk in the legal sense. He's complied with the terms. He's not facing criminal charges. At this point, he can technically go wherever he wants. But I thought you should know. Yeah, Ryan said. Thanks. He hung up. He looked at Emily. She had read his face. She was already waiting. He left town, Ryan said, this afternoon. She took that in, a breath, then steadily, good. Ryan looked at her. I mean it, she said. I don't want him here. I don't want to run into him at the grocery store. I don't want to see his car in a parking lot and have my stomach do what my stomach has been doing for 10 months. She set down her coffee cup. If he left, that's one less thing. It is, Ryan said. He paused. Marcus is tracking where he went. Not aggressively, just due diligence, making sure he's not trying to do something that violates the terms. You don't trust that he'll hold to the agreement. I trust the agreement, Ryan said. I trust what happens to him if he doesn't hold to it. Those are different things. Emily considered that distinction. Fair enough, she said. Carol came back with the check. Ryan took it. Emily started to reach for her bag, and Ryan put his hand on the check in a way that communicated without drama that the conversation about who was paying was not a conversation they were going to have. Emily pulled her hand back. Fine, she said. I'll tell you when I need you to buy me pie. When will that be? When you're on your feet in Missoula and you call me and tell me you're doing okay. She looked at him across the table. In the warm light of the diner with the tiredness on her and the sling on her arm, and her mother's photograph somewhere in the box in the back of Ryan's truck, she looked. He searched for the right word, real. Not the managed, careful version of Emily he'd been interacting with since Friday night, the one running constant calculations, but the actual Emily beneath the calculations. Tired and real, and still here. Okay, she said. Deal. Job. They drove back to the motel in Ryan's truck, 2 boxes of Emily's belongings in the bed, neither of them talking much. The dark came early in January in Montana, dropping fast after 4 in the afternoon, and by the time they pulled in the parking lot, the sky was fully black and the temperature had gone below 0. Danny Falk was leaning against his bike in the parking lot. Emily saw him first. Did you tell him to be here? No, Ryan said. They got out. Danny straightened up. He had a paper bag in one hand from a place Ryan recognized as a bakery, 1 town over that was technically out of his way by about 40 minutes. Heard you had a good day, Danny said. He held out the bag toward Emily. Cinnamon rolls. They were warm an hour ago. They're probably still okay. Emily took the bag. She looked at it. She looked at Danny. You drove 40 minutes out of your way to bring me cinnamon rolls, she said. I drove 43 minutes, Danny said. The construction on Route 12. Emily stared at him for a moment. Then she opened the bag and looked inside. She closed it. She held it against her chest with her good arm. Thank you, Danny, she said. Don't mention it. He looked at Ryan. Chapter meeting Thursday. You planning to be back Wednesday night, Ryan said. Danny nodded. He looked at Emily one more time. You need anything at all. Ryan's got my number. I know, Emily said. He got on his bike. He rode away. The taillight disappeared around the corner, and the parking lot was quiet again and cold. Emily looked at the bag of cinnamon rolls. I like him, she said. Everyone does, Ryan said. He'd be insufferable about it if he knew. Don't tell him. Never. They went inside. Emily sat on the edge of her bed with the cinnamon rolls, and Ryan sat in the single chair. And they split one which was dense and sweet, and still faintly warm in the center, and they watched a nature documentary about wolves on the motel television for an hour, without talking about wolves or codes, or anything that had happened in the past 5 days. At 9 o'clock, Ryan's phone rang. Patricia Osei. He stepped outside to take it. The cold was immediate and total. He stood in the parking lot. Everything went through, Patricia said. I have the signed and notarized copies. The license resignation has been formally received by the board. The initial investigation file has been opened and assigned to a case officer. All 4 terms are documented as completed within the agreed timeframe. And the financial piece, the Division of Securities has opened a preliminary inquiry. That'll move on its own schedule probably 3 to 5 months before any formal finding. But it's open. It's not going away. Ryan exhaled. Thank you, Patricia. Don't thank me yet, she said. The next 6 months are going to require attention. If he applies for licensure in another state, the Montana investigation is going to follow him. If he makes contact with Emily in any form, I need to know within the hour. The terms of that agreement have teeth, and I intend to use them. Understood. How is she? Ryan looked back at the motel window. The light was on inside. The shadow of the television moved on the curtain. She's eating cinnamon rolls and watching a documentary, he said. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's a good sign. Yeah, he said. It is. Tell her, Patricia paused. Tell her she was extraordinary. What she put together, the way she managed herself in that office on Monday. I've handled a lot of these cases, Ryan. I've worked with a lot of women in her position. What she did, the way she did it with a broken arm and 48 hours of preparation, that was exceptional. I'll tell her, Ryan said. He went back inside. Emily looked up from the television. Patricia, he said, everything's filed and recorded. It's done. Emily nodded. She picked up the remaining half of a cinnamon roll. She also said to tell you that you were extraordinary. Emily stopped chewing. She looked at him. Something moved across her face that he recognized as the expression of a person receiving something they had not expected and were not quite sure what to do with. She said that, Emily said. Boy, her exact word. Emily looked back at the television. The documentary was showing a wolf moving across a snowfield unhurried and deliberate, the camera tracking it from a distance. She watched it for a moment. I was terrified the whole time, she said. I know. Every single minute of that meeting, I was terrified. I know that too. Is that what extraordinary looks like? Because from inside, it just felt like trying not to fall apart. Ryan looked at her. Yeah, he said. That's exactly what it looks like from inside. Thursday morning, Emily made a decision. She had been awake since 5, had lain in the motel bed, listening to the heat come on and off, and thinking through the architecture of what came next. Not the legal details, which were Patricia's territory. Not the investigative follow-up, which was Marcus's. The personal architecture. The question of what she was going to build, and how and who she was going to be while she was building it. By 6, she had most of it sorted. At 7, she knocked on Ryan's door. He opened it looking like he'd been up for an hour already, which he had. He stepped back, and she came in and sat in the chair, and he sat on the edge of the bed. I want to go back to school, she said. I have a degree in social work that I got before I met him, and never used because he had opinions about where I should be spending my time. She said the last part with a flatness that contained a specific kind of anger. Not explosive, but precise like a blade. I want to get my licensure. I want to work with women in situations like mine. Ryan looked at her. Not in a crisis center way necessarily, she said. Or maybe that too. But I've been thinking the hardest part of the past 10 months wasn't any single incident. The hardest part was the isolation. The way he made me feel like there was no one I could tell and nowhere I could go. And I keep thinking, what if there had been someone, not a hotline, not a pamphlet, an actual person who had been through it and came out the other side and could sit across from you and say, I know what this is, and here is what is possible. Ryan was very still. I want to be that person, Emily said, for someone else. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "When did you figure this out?" "About 4:30 this morning." "You've been awake since 4:30? 5. I was lying in the dark until 5. He looked at the floor. He was doing something with his jaw that she recognized as the particular expression Ryan Carter made when he was feeling something he didn't have immediate language for. "What?" she said. "Nothing." "Ryan." He looked up. He stopped. "When you called me, I thought I was coming to get you out of a situation, to bring you somewhere safe and deal with the threat and get you to the other side of it." He paused. "I didn't think I was coming to watch you figure out who you want to be. I thought you already knew that part. I didn't know you were going to—" He stopped again. "What?" she said quietly. "Turn the worst thing that happened to you into the reason to help someone else," he said. "In about 72 hours. Emily looked at him. "It's not 72 hours, she said. "It's been 10 months. The 72 hours was the part where I finally said it out loud." He nodded. He looked back at the floor. He didn't say anything else for a moment because there wasn't anything to say, and he knew it. "I'm going to need help," Emily said. "Ma, getting set up in Missoula, finding a program that will accept my existing credits, finding an apartment." She paused. "I'm not asking you to do any of that for me. I'm telling you I'm going to be asking for help, finding the right people to help me do it. That's different." "It is different," he said. "Patricia might know someone at the university. Marcus knows everyone in Missoula, apparently." "He does. And I'm going to need the 2 unauthorized transfers returned before I can put down a first month's rent anywhere. That's in the terms. How long does that take?" Patricia said Jason's attorney confirmed the transfers would be reversed within 5 business days of the signing, so by Monday. Emily did the math. "Okay," she said. "Then I have the weekend." She stood up. She went to the window. Outside, the parking lot was ordinary in the morning light, a few cars, a truck with an out-of-state plate, an ice machine humming against the wall. "Ryan," she said without turning around. "Yeah. I want to go to Grandpa's ranch, before I go to Missoula, before any of the next thing starts." She paused. "I want to stand in that place. I don't know why, exactly. I just want to." "I know why," Ryan said. She turned around. "Because that's where the code came from," he said. "And the code worked. And you want to be in that place for a little while before you move to the next one." She looked at him. "Yeah," she said. "That's exactly it." "Then we go to the ranch," he said. "I'll call ahead. Old Tennyson still runs the property. He'll open the house. This weekend?" "This weekend." She turned back to the window. "Okay," she said. "Good." Outside, the ice machine hummed. The truck with the out-of-state plate had its engine running, someone warming it up against the cold, getting ready to go somewhere. The morning was doing what mornings did indifferently and continuously, and Emily Carter stood at the window and watched it and felt the specific combination of things she had been feeling since Wednesday at 4:22 p.m. The quiet where the noise had been the tiredness that wasn't defeat, the forward-facing pull of the next thing. Her arm ached. It was going to ache for weeks. Physical therapy would take months. There were nightmares she hadn't had yet that were probably coming. Her counselor had told her a long time ago, in a different context, that the nervous system often waited until it felt safe before it started processing what it had survived, and she knew enough to know that the processing was ahead of her, not behind her. She knew all of that. She also knew that in 5 days she had moved from a hospital emergency room with a borrowed phone and 5 whispered words to standing on the other side of something she had not been sure, at many points in the past 10 months, that she would ever get to the other side of. She thought about Dana Rice on the phone, that long exhale. The question, "It's really over." She thought about Jason's voice on the voicemail, normal and pleasant, and describing 63 incidents as a misunderstanding. She thought about Dr. Avery holding her hand a moment too long in the discharge doorway and the second number on the back of the referral sheet. She thought about Carol, the waitress at Merle's Diner, refilling coffee without being asked and calling everyone honey without condescension. She thought about Danny Falk driving 43 minutes out of his way for cinnamon rolls. She thought about her grandfather in his kitchen, 2 kids sitting across from him, his voice patient and serious. If something is wrong and you can't say it out loud because the wrong person is listening. She pulled out her phone. She opened the text thread between her and Ryan from the past week. The careful coded text from Jason's house, the weather observations and movie questions, and the one about Capellini. And she scrolled up to the very top of the thread to a message from 14 months ago that she had never deleted. That read simply, "Merry Christmas, M. Call me sometime." She had not called him. She was going to call him from now on. She put the phone in her pocket. She turned away from the window. "I'm going to get packed," she said. "Then I want to get breakfast somewhere that isn't this motel. Then I want to get in the truck and go." "Merle's," Ryan said. "God, no, not Merle's. I want something different. There's a place on Route 9 that does Eggs Benedict that would end a fist fight. That is a very specific endorsement. It's a very good Eggs Benedict." She went to the door. She stopped. She turned around one more time, and she looked at her brother sitting on the edge of the motel bed in his Hell's Angels cut with his gray-streaked beard and his careful eyes. This man who had driven through 11-degree weather in the middle of the night and slept in a hospital corridor chair and kept a promise that cost him every instinct he had. "Ryan," she said. "Yeah." "I'm glad it was you," she said. "That Grandpa taught the code to. I'm glad it was you." He looked at her. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She went to pack. They left Pine Ridge at 9:40 on Thursday morning. Emily's 2 boxes in the truck bed, her bag on the seat between them. The town fell away in the rearview mirror the way small towns do gradually, and then all at once the last gas station and the last familiar storefront, and then just road and sky, and the marginal open chest of Montana doing what it had always done, indifferent and enormous, and in its way clean. Emily watched it go. She did not feel the things you were supposed to feel about leaving. No grief, no nostalgia, none of the complicated attachment that places accumulate, even when those places have held bad things. What she felt was simpler than any of that. What she felt was forward. She turned her face from the window. She looked at the road ahead. Ryan drove. He didn't put music on. He didn't fill the silence. He drove the way he did everything, with a settled, deliberate attention that communicated without words that he was present and that the presence was not going anywhere. About 30 miles outside of town, Emily said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "The code. Did you ever think about it? After Grandpa died, did you ever think, what if she uses it? What would you do?" Ryan thought about it honestly. "Sometimes," he said. "And again, and the answer was always the same. I come. Whatever I'm doing, I come." Emily looked at the road. "What if you'd been somewhere you couldn't leave?" she said. "What if the timing had been different?" "The timing was what it was," Ryan said. "I was in Billings. My bike was in the lot. The roads were clear." He paused. "But even if I'd been somewhere harder to leave, Em, the answer still would have been the same. Some things you don't calculate. Some things you just know." She was quiet for a moment. "I spent 10 months being afraid to use it," she said. "I told myself it wasn't bad enough yet. I told myself I was handling it. I told myself the code was for emergencies, and what I was in wasn't an emergency, it was just..." She stopped. "My life. I told myself it was just my life." Ryan didn't say anything immediately. He let the road pass for a moment. "You used it when you needed it," he said. "That's the whole point of a code. It waits." "Grandpa said that," Emily said slowly. "I'd forgotten. He said the code waits. It's always there." "Yeah," Ryan said. "He did say that." She leaned her head back against the seat. She closed her eyes. The truck moved through the Montana morning steady and unhurried, and the miles went by underneath them. And after a while, Emily's breathing changed, and Ryan understood she had fallen asleep. He drove. He turned the heat up slightly. He adjusted the mirror. He kept his eyes on the road, and he thought about his grandfather, and about codes that wait, and about a girl who had learned one when she was 9 years old and had carried it for 17 years, like a fire exit she hoped she'd never need. She had needed it. She had used it. And here they were on the other side of it, heading toward the ranch where the code had been given the trees and the cold and the place that had shaped both of them before the world had gotten its various hands on them. Emily slept. Ryan drove. The road went on. Emily slept for 90 minutes and woke up somewhere past the county line with her neck stiff and her left arm aching in the particular disorientation of a person whose body has finally collected on a debt it's been deferring for days. She sat up. She looked at the road. She looked at Ryan. "You should have woken me," she said. "You needed it more than I needed the conversation." She stretched her right arm above her head and winced when the motion pulled something adjacent to the broken one. She lowered it. She looked out the window at the landscape moving past the empty reach of central Montana. In January, The kind of geography that made you feel both very small and somehow clarified, like the scale of it burned off everything that wasn't essential. How much farther, she said. About 40 minutes. She nodded. She sat with that for a while. 40 minutes to the ranch where they had both spent summers as children, where their grandfather had taught them to fish and to be patient and to use a code if the wrong person was listening. She had not been back since the summer after his funeral 7 years ago, when she and Ryan had driven out together and walked the property and said the kind of things people say when they're processing a loss that doesn't have clean edges. She had not expected to go back under these circumstances. She had not planned to. But sitting in the truck now, 40 minutes out, she felt the pull of it more specifically than she'd expected. Not nostalgia exactly, but something more purposeful, like returning to the place where a promise was made in order to close the loop of it. Ryan, she said. Yeah. When we get there, I want some time alone, not all of it, but some. I figured, he said, that you're not offended. Emily, I'm the one who drove you here. She almost smiled. Fair point. They rode the last 40 minutes mostly in silence, and it was the comfortable kind. The silence of two people who had been through enough together in the past week that quiet had become a form of communication rather than a gap in one. Old Tennyson, who was 74 and had managed the Carter property since before Ryan was born, had the house open and the heat running when they pulled up. He came out to meet them with the particular unhurried dignity of a man who had seen a great deal and had learned that most of it didn't require commentary. He shook Ryan's hand. He looked at Emily at the sling at her face and he said, "Good to have you back, Emily," in a voice that was completely plain and completely sincere, and that was the entirety of what he said about any of it. She was grateful for that more than she could easily express. They went inside. The house smelled like pine and cold air, and the particular smell of a place that has been closed for a season. Not unpleasant, just honest. The smell of a building that has been sitting with its own stillness and is now being asked to receive people again. Ryan took her boxes to one of the back bedrooms. Tennyson had left coffee on and firewood stacked, and then made himself scarce in the way of someone who understood the difference between presence and intrusion. Emily stood in the main room. She stood in the middle of it, and she just stood. Let the room be the room, let the years in it do whatever they were going to do. The kitchen table was still there, the same one, Schwim. She had sat at that table at 9 years old and learned a code, and she had sat at it the summer after her grandfather's funeral and cried in a way she hadn't let herself cry anywhere else. And she was standing in the same room now, having used the code and come out the other side, and the table was just a table unchanged, indifferent to what it had witnessed. And somehow that was the most grounding thing she had encountered all week. Things persisted. Tables and houses and pine trees and the cold air coming off the mountains. Things persisted regardless. Ryan came back into the room. He read her face. "I'm going to call Danny," he said. "Give you some time." "Thank you," she said. He went out. She heard the front door, then silence. She sat down at the table. She put her right hand flat on the surface of it, feeling the grain of the old wood under her palm. She sat there for a while and she thought about her grandfather, not the end of him, not the funeral, but the living version, the everyday version. The way he made coffee too strong and never apologized for it. The way he listened to people with his whole body turned toward them, not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually taking in what was being said. The way he had looked at two children across this very table and given them something to carry, not a burden, a tool, and had trusted them to understand the difference. Whenever danger enters your house, he had said, you don't have to scream. You use the code. She had used the code. She pressed her hand harder against the table. She had used it, and Ryan had come, and Jason had signed 4 documents in a lawyer's office, and Dana Rice had exhaled on the phone like a woman setting down something she had been carrying for 2 years. And somewhere in Missoula, there was an apartment she hadn't found yet, and a social work program she hadn't enrolled in yet, and a version of herself she hadn't become yet. She sat at that table for 22 minutes. She counted. Old habit. Then she stood up, put on her coat, and went outside to find Ryan. He was standing near the tree-lined phone in his jacket pocket, looking at the property the way he always looked at it, with a kind of territorial affection that was not possessive but protective. The look of someone who understood that certain places mattered not because of what they were, but because of what had happened in Bathia. She walked to him. She stood beside him. You okay, he said, without looking at her. Getting there, she said. That's still the right answer. It's always the right answer. They stood together for a while. The cold was deep, but still no wind, which was unusual for January, and the quiet of it felt almost deliberate, like the weather had decided to give them something today. I've been thinking, Emily said. About what? About what I want the next year to look like, specifically. She had been doing this since she woke up in the truck, building it out piece by piece the way she had built the evidence portfolio methodically with attention to what mattered and what didn't. I want to be enrolled in the licensure program by March. I want an apartment in Missoula before the end of January. I want to start therapy, real therapy, not crisis counseling, the ongoing kind within the next 2 weeks. I have the name of someone Patricia recommended. Good, Ryan said. And I want to call Mom's sister in Bozeman, Aunt Carol. I haven't talked to her in almost 2 years. Jason had opinions about her. She said the last sentence the same way she'd said it at breakfast. Flat, precise, the anger in it like a blade rather than a fire. I want to call her, and I want to tell her I'm sorry for the distance, and I want to have dinner with her before February. She'll want to hear from you, Ryan said. I know. That makes it harder and easier at the same time. Yeah, that's usually how it works. She looked at the trees. They stood there, unchanging the way trees did, absorbing every season without registering, it giving nothing away present in the way that things are present when they're not trying to be anything other than what they are. I want to tell you something, Emily said, and I need you to just hear it, not respond to it right away. Just let it land. Ryan turned to look at her. I blamed myself, she said, for a long time. Not for what he did. I never thought that was my fault, not completely, not the way you'd think. But I blame myself for staying, for not using the code sooner, for letting it go 63 incidents before I did something. She held his gaze. And I'm working on putting that down. I'm not all the way there, but I'm working on it. Ryan listened. He did not respond immediately the way she'd asked. He let it land. She could see him receiving it, the slight shift in his posture, the set of his jaw, processing something internal. Okay, he said after a moment. That's it, okay. You said just let it land. She looked at him. I did say that. So it landed. He paused. And for what it's worth, from where I've been standing this week, the person who handled this wasn't someone who needed to be blamed for anything. She was someone who built a case in secret over 8 months, used a code at exactly the right moment, refused to let me handle it the fast way because she knew the fast way wouldn't last, walked into a room alone and dismantled a man who had 10 months of psychological advantage on her, and then called a stranger on the phone to tell her it was over because she didn't want her to feel alone in it. He looked back at the trees. That's not someone who failed. That's someone who won. In a way I couldn't have. Emily was quiet. You could have, she said. Not this way, he said. Not without blowing the whole thing up in the first 24 hours. He paused. I know what I am. I know what I'm useful for, and I know what I'm not. You knew exactly which parts you needed from me, and you took those parts, and you did the rest yourself. He turned to look at her. That's not something I'm going to let you feel bad about. She looked at him for a long time. I'm going to be okay, she said, not a question. I know you are, he said, not reassurance. Statement of fact. She nodded. She looked back at the trees, and then something happened that she had not planned and did not see coming. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. Montana area code, but not one she recognized. She almost declined it. Her thumb hovered. She answered. Emily Carter. A woman's voice. Older, somewhere in her 50s, professional with a particular crispness of someone accustomed to delivering information to people who needed to hear it. Yes, Emily said. My name is Carolyn Marsh. I'm the lead case officer at the Montana Department of Labor and Industry Professional Licensing Division. I'm calling regarding the complaint filed this week against Jason Mercer. Emily's spine straightened. Beside her, Ryan had gone very still. I'm listening, Emily said. Ms. Carter, I want to be clear that I'm not calling to discuss the details of the investigation. That process will proceed according to its standard timeline. I'm calling because, in reviewing the documentation submitted with the complaint, I came across something that I felt warranted a direct conversation. She paused. The documentation you submitted is among the most thorough I have seen in my 14 years in this office. The organization of it, the detail, the consistency across 8 months of records, It's the kind of file that makes our work considerably more effective. I wanted you to know that personally. Emily held the phone. She could feel Ryan looking at her. Thank you, she said. I also want to tell you, and this is outside my official capacity, this is just one person speaking to another, that what you described in those records is something our office sees with troubling frequency in licensed financial professionals. The specific combination of financial control and personal abuse operating simultaneously, exploiting the trust relationship between an advisor and a personal partner. Carolyn Marsh paused. Mercer resigned his license before we had the opportunity to act on the complaint. But the investigation is proceeding regardless, because resignation doesn't close the file. It just changes what we're investigating. What does that mean for him? Emily said. It means that if we find sufficient evidence of professional misconduct, and based on what I've read, I expect we will, the finding goes on the permanent record. He cannot be licensed in Montana again. And because our office participates in the national licensing database, any state where he applies for licensure will have access to that finding. Emily stood in the cold outside her grandfather's ranch with her broken arm and her phone and felt something she had not expected to feel. Not relief, which she had already felt, and not triumph, which she had decided wasn't the right shape for what this was. What she felt was more like completion, the sense of a mechanism finishing its cycle, the last gear finding its position. Okay, she said. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for what you submitted, Carolyn Marsh said. Take care of yourself, Miss Carter. The call ended. Emily lowered the phone. She looked at Ryan. The licensing investigation is continuing even after the resignation, she said. It goes on a permanent national record. He can't practice anywhere. Ryan looked at her. It's done, she said. All of it. It's actually done. He nodded. He said nothing. He looked back at the trees and Emily looked back at them, and they stood there together in the cold Montana quiet while the thing they were both feeling moved through them at its own pace and in its own form, different for each of them. Because it was always different, because loss and relief in the complicated arithmetic of family were always personal, even when they were shared. A minute passed, maybe two. Ryan, Emily said, yeah, the black wolves aren't limping anymore. He turned to look at her. She was looking at the trees. Her voice had been steady when she said it, not performative, not ceremonial, just true. The code completing its circuit. The phrase that had traveled 300 miles in a whisper coming home to the place where it was born. Ryan was quiet for a moment. No, he said, they're not. They found their way back, she said. They did. She turned to face him. Her eyes were clear, tired still, and clear the way eyes look when the thing they've been searching for has been located. I want to stay here tonight, she said. One night, and tomorrow I want to drive it to Missoula, and I want to start looking at apartments, and I want to call Aunt Carol on the way. Tennyson already put sheets on the beds, Ryan said. Of course he did. He anticipated. He always anticipated. She looked at the house. He was like you that way. Ryan looked at her sideways. I'm going to tell him you said that. Please do. He'll probably just nod and say, I know. Almost certainly. She started walking back toward the house. Ryan fell into step beside her. What time do you want to leave tomorrow? She said. Whenever you're ready. 8. I'll have the truck warmed up by 7:45. She nodded. They walked. The ground was hard under their feet, and the air was cold enough to see, and the house ahead had its lights on warm against the January dark that was already beginning to gather at the edges of the afternoon. At the door, she stopped. She turned around and looked back at the trees one more time, the line of them dark and still against the sky. She looked at them for a long moment. Then she went inside. That night, they ate the dinner Tennyson had quietly left in the refrigerator, a covered dish of something with chicken and vegetables that had clearly been prepared by someone who understood that people coming back to a place after a long absence needed food that felt like care without requiring acknowledgement. They ate at the kitchen table. They talked about small things and some large ones. Ryan told her a story about Danny Falk from 3 years ago that she hadn't heard before, involving a wrong turn in Wyoming and a county fair and a situation with a livestock judge that was evidently still a point of contention within the chapter. She laughed a real laugh, the full version, not the almost version she'd managed at Merle's Diner. Ryan looked at her when she laughed. He looked at her the way you look at something you've been afraid you might lose and haven't. After dinner, she called Aunt Carol. She stood in the hallway with her back against the wall and her phone pressed to her ear, and when Carol answered and said, "Emily, sweetheart, is that you? I'm up," in a voice that was so immediately warm it was almost unbearable. Emily closed her eyes and said, "Aunt Carol, I'm so sorry. I should have called a long time ago." And Carol, who was 63 and had known something was wrong for 2 years, because she knew her niece and she knew the specific texture of managed distance, said only, "You're calling now. That's what matters. Are you okay?" And Emily said, "I'm getting there." And Carol said, "That's the right answer. That's always the right answer." Emily opened her eyes. Down the hall, she could hear Ryan doing the dishes with the radio on low. Some country station playing something she half recognized. And outside the house, the Montana night was doing what it did, enormous and cold and full of stars that couldn't be seen anywhere else, the way they could be seen here in the dark, away from everything. She talked to her aunt for an hour and 12 minutes. When she hung up, she stood in the hallway for a moment, holding the phone against her chest, and she felt the specific and irreplaceable sensation of a door being opened that had been closed for too long, the kind of cold air that rushes in when a door finally opens, that is uncomfortable for a moment, and then immediately necessary, immediately right, immediately part of what the room should have been containing all along. She put the phone in her pocket. She walked to the kitchen doorway. Ryan had finished the dishes and was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, the radio still going soft in the background. "Good call," he said. "Very good call," she said. "We're having dinner in Bozeman the weekend after next. She's going to cry when she sees you." "I know, I'll probably cry too." She leaned against the doorframe. "That's allowed, right? Within certain limits," Ryan said. "What limits?" "I'll tell you if you exceed them." She looked at him. In the kitchen light at their grandfather's table with the radio and the coffee and the cold outside the walls, she searched for it like himself. The most specific version of himself, not the chapter president or the feared president, or the man who had driven 300 miles through 11-degree weather and held a vigil outside a hospital bay door. Just Ryan, her brother. "I want to ask you something," she said. "You've said that a lot this week. I have a lot of questions. It's been an eventful week." "Ask," he said. "The chapter, your work, what you do, I know I've never asked about it properly. I've kept distance from it. Not because I was ashamed, just because," she paused, "because I was trying to keep my life separate from the parts of your life that scared me." Ryan looked at her steadily. "I don't want to keep that distance anymore," she said. "I don't mean I want to come to meetings or wear a patch. I mean, I want to know what your life actually looks like. I want to call you on a random Tuesday and ask how you are. I want you to call me." "I call you," Ryan said, "twice a year at Christmas and my birthday." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't want to crowd you," he said. "I know. I'm telling you that you can crowd me a little. Specifically you. No one else." She stood straight. "I've spent 10 months being systematically isolated from everyone who mattered. I'm not doing that anymore. Not for any reason. Not even to respect someone's space who doesn't need their space respected." Ryan looked at the table. He looked back at her. "Okay," he said. "Twice a week minimum," she said. "Calls, texts, I don't care. Just," she stopped. "Just don't let me disappear again. Even if I get busy, even if I seem fine, especially if I seem fine." Ryan held her gaze. "I hear you," he said. "Good." She pushed off the doorframe. She poured herself a cup of the coffee, strong the same way their grandfather had always made it, the way Tennyson had apparently kept making it out of some loyalty to the dead man's preferences. She sat down across from Ryan at the table. They sat there together for a while. The radio played something slow. Outside, the night did its work. Inside, the table held them the way it had always held the people who needed holding, without ceremony, without comment, just by being there. The next morning broke clear and sharp and impossibly bright, the way January mornings were in Montana, when the sky decided to cooperate, the kind of morning that made the cold feel like a gift rather than a punishment, like the world had been cleaned overnight, and this was the result. Emily was up before the alarm. She was dressed and had her bag packed and was standing in the kitchen making coffee when Ryan appeared in the doorway at 7:20, with his hair still half flattened from sleep. "You said 8, he said. "I changed my mind." "You didn't tell me." "I'm telling you now. Coffee's ready." He came in, he poured a cup. He looked at her. She was different this morning, not transformed. Transformation was a word for movies, and real life was more gradual and more complicated than that. But she was different in the specific way of someone who has slept in the right place and woken up with the architecture of the next chapter already beginning to take shape inside them. Purposeful. The word he had been looking for since the ranch was purposeful, the quality of a person who knows where they are going and has decided to go there. Tennyson's not up yet, Ryan said. I left him a note. What did it say? Thank you for everything. The coffee is exactly how Grandpa made it. Please don't ever change it. Ryan looked at her over his cup. He's going to put that note somewhere, Ryan said. He's going to keep it. Good, Emily said. He should. They were in the truck by 7:40, which was 5 minutes earlier than Ryan had promised to be ready, which Emily noted. I said 7:45, he said. You're early, she said. I'm noting it. Don't. She noted it anyway. She had already taken out her phone and was holding it in her right hand, a number pulled up on the screen that she had found last night through Patricia's recommendation, the therapist in Missoula, Dr. Hadley, who specialized in recovery from coercive control. I'm going to call her on the way, Emily said, for an appointment. Good idea, Ryan said. I'm nervous about it. Also good, he said. Means you're taking it seriously. She looked at the number. What if I don't know how to talk about it? I've been running on documentation and logistics for a week. I don't know what happens when someone asks me how I feel about it. You've been telling me how you feel about it all week, Ryan said. She looked at him. You've been doing it the whole time, he said. Calling it thinking out loud, calling it questions, calling it information. But it was all how you felt. You already know how to do it. You just needed someone trained to receive it properly. She looked at the number again. She pressed call. It rang twice. A calm, unhurried voice answered with a name and a greeting. Emily straightened in the seat. Hi, she said. My name is Emily Carter. I was referred to you by Patricia Osei. I'd like to make an appointment. Ryan kept his eyes on the road. He listened to Emily's side of the conversation, her voice clear and steady, asking and answering the practical business of beginning. He heard her say Thursday at 2 o'clock. He heard her say yes, she had insurance. He heard her say yes, she understood about the first session being primarily intake. She hung up. She held the phone in her lap. Thursday at 2, she said. I'll drive you, Ryan said. You don't have to drive me. I'm going to live there. I can get myself to a therapy appointment. First one, he said. She looked at him. She was going to argue, and then she didn't. Fine, she said. First one. They drove. The road unspooled ahead of them, the same road they'd taken the other direction 5 days ago, but different now in all the ways that mattered. The light, different. The weight in the truck, different. The quality of the silence between them, different. This was not the silence of two people managing something difficult together. This was the silence of two people who had been through something difficult together and were coming out the other side and were finding out what came after. What came after was road and coffee and a phone ringing with Aunt Carol's number at 9:43. Because Carol was calling this time, not waiting to be called, and Emily answered immediately and said, I was just thinking about you, which was true. What came after was Marcus Webb texting at 10:15 to say that the message to the other two women had been received and that one of them had responded with a single line, thank you for letting me know, which was enough, which was exactly enough, no more needed. What came after was Danny Falk calling Ryan at 10:50 to ask about Thursday's meeting and staying on the line for 20 minutes talking about nothing important while Emily watched the landscape and made small notes in a notebook she'd found in her bag. Apartment requirements, enrollment deadlines, the name of a housing nonprofit Patricia had mentioned that helped women in transition. She was making lists. She was building the next thing. At 11:37, they crossed into Missoula County, and Emily sat up slightly and looked out the window with the specific attention of someone reading a place, rather than passing through it, reading it for the things she needed, the shape of it, whether it had room for her. What do you think, Ryan said. I think it has room, she said. It does, he said. They pulled into the city, and Ryan drove slowly through the neighborhoods Patricia had suggested, not formally, just to let Emily look, to let her get the feel of streets she'd be walking. She watched. She was quiet in the way of someone storing information, rather than avoiding conversation. At one particular block, she said, stop. He stopped. She looked at a building, unremarkable, 4 stories, a handwritten sign in the front window that said vacancy. She looked at it for a long time. Can we just, Can you just wait here for a minute, she said. Take whatever time you need. She got out of the truck. She walked to the building. She stood outside and looked at it, and Ryan watched her from the truck, watched her assess it with the methodical attention she'd brought to everything this week, and then watched her pull out her phone and take a photograph of the number on the vacancy sign. She came back. She got in. She said nothing about the building directly. She just put her phone back in her pocket and said, "Okay, what's for lunch?" "There's a place 2 blocks from here. Does it have good soup? Best in Missoula." "Let's go," she said. 3 months later, Emily Carter signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment 4 blocks from the University of Montana campus. She had been accepted into the MSW licensure program beginning in September, accelerated track, given her existing degree 18 months to completion. She had been seeing Dr. Hadley every Thursday at 2 o'clock. She had not missed a single session. The licensing board's investigation into Jason Mercer concluded in March with a formal finding of professional misconduct across multiple counts. The finding was entered into the national database. He applied for licensure in Idaho 6 weeks later. The application was denied. Emily heard about it from Patricia, who heard about it from the Idaho board's office, which had called to thank her for the quality of the Montana file. Emily sat with that information for a little while. She sat with the specific and complicated feeling of justice that is not satisfying in the movie sense, but is correct in the real sense. The sense of a mechanism working the way it was designed to work, slowly and thoroughly, and without drama, the gears catching and holding. She called Ryan. "Idaho denied his application," she said. A pause. "Good," Ryan said. "That's all you've got. Good. What do you want me to say?" "I don't know, something." A pause, then, "He tried the easy path and you made it impossible. He tried the next path and the file followed him. At some point, a man runs out of paths." Ryan's voice was even. "That's what justice looks like when it actually works. It's not loud. It just closes doors." Emily thought about that. "Yeah," she said. "That's right. How's Thursday going?" "Good, hard, the right kind of hard." "Good. Dr. Hadley said something this week that I keep thinking about. She said that the most important thing about surviving what I survived isn't what it did to me. It's what I choose to do with what I know now." Ryan was quiet for a moment. "Smart woman," he said. "Very." Emily looked out her apartment window. Below, the street was doing its ordinary business, people walking a dog, pulling at its leash, a woman pushing a stroller with considerable focused energy. "I've been thinking about that, what I choose to do with what I know. And I've been talking to Patricia about whether there's a way to formalize something, a kind of peer support structure, not a hotline, not a crisis line, something more personal than that. Women who've been through coercive control situations specifically trained to sit with other women who are still in them. Not to tell them what to do, just to be the person who says, I know what this is. I know what it feels like to count seconds in an elevator because it's the only thing that feels like control, and I know what comes after." Ryan didn't speak for a moment. "Patricia thinks it's viable," Emily said. "She thinks there's grant funding available, and she knows people at 2 or 3 organizations who'd want to be involved. It wouldn't be this year. It might not even be next year, but it's a direction." Ryan said. "Yeah. Do it," he said, simply. No qualification, no hedging, no careful framing, just the directive, the way he said things when he was certain. "I intend to," she said. Bunna. On the first anniversary of the night, Emily borrowed a stranger's phone in Pine Ridge General Hospital. She and Ryan drove to their grandfather's ranch together. It was January again. Cold, clear the Montana sky, doing its enormous, honest work above them. Tennyson had the house open and the coffee on. They arrived mid-morning and walked the property the way they had always walked it, not quickly, not with any particular destination, just moving through the place and letting it be what it was. At one point, they stopped near the tree line. They stood there together, not speaking, looking at the trees, the way people look at things that have been there longer than they have and will be there after they're gone. After a while, Ryan said quietly, "The black wolves aren't limping anymore." Emily turned to look at him. He was looking at the trees. She looked at them too. She thought about a 9-year-old girl learning a code she hoped she'd never need. She thought about a hospital bathroom with the shower running and a borrowed phone with 300 miles of Montana between her and the only person she trusted. with those 5 words. She thought about 45 seconds in an elevator, and a leather portfolio on a desk, and a woman named Dana Rice exhaling on the phone like someone setting down a weight they'd carried for 2 years. She thought about a table that had held its people without ceremony and without comment and without ever asking anything in return. She thought about all of it. She thought about Dr. Hadley on Thursday at 2 o'clock, the right kind of hard. She thought about Aunt Carol and Bozeman dinner once a month now without fail. She thought about the grant application she'd submitted last week, the one with Patricia's name on it alongside hers, the one describing a program that didn't have a name yet but would. She thought about what Ryan had said on the phone 3 months ago, the things she'd written down in her notebook and kept. It's not loud. It just closes doors. She looked at the trees. They found their way back, she said. Ryan looked at her. She looked back at him. And this is what was true, the thing that had been true from the moment those 5 words traveled 300 miles and a man who hadn't heard them in 15 years dropped everything and came that the strongest protector is not the one who throws the first punch. It is the one who builds 3 phone calls into a night drive and keeps a promise that cost him every instinct he has and stands outside a building in January so that the person he loves can walk into a room without being afraid. It is the one who says I'm coming and means it completely without condition, without limit, without ever once asking to be thanked for it. And it is the woman who whispers the code, who carries it for 17 years through every ordinary day and every hard one and uses it at the exact right moment, not too early and not too late in a hospital bathroom, with the shower running and the wrong person just down the hall. Who walks into a room alone and speaks the truth she has been documenting in secret for 8 months and does not flinch? Who calls a stranger to say it's over for both of us? Who sits at her grandfather's table and presses her palm against the grain of the old wood and lets the years in it do what years do? Who builds the next thing and the thing after that and does not wait for anyone's permission to begin? The wolves were not limping anymore. They had found their way home, and they were never going back.